Hello, welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and we are here with our continuing coverage of the people of the state of Indiana versus Richard M. Allen, day 15, confession day, the day that the state rested their case in chief. The state is done. Obviously, they have the opportunity to come with a rebuttal case after the defense is done, but all their evidence is in at this point. And today was, I think, in their minds, going to be the home run because today was the day that they played all the recorded calls between Richard Allen and primarily with Kathy Allen, his wife, and a call with his mother, Jan. And there were 8 calls total. Just to kind of give you the overview of the day, and happy Halloween, everybody. First and foremost, I'm sad. I'm sad that I'm not at home with my family, but my kids.
That's all right. Your youngest is out with her friends and didn't want her parents tagging along.
That's for sure. Oh, and I forgot to introduce my brilliant and beautiful co-host, Allie. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all.
Happy Halloween, babe.
Happy Halloween.
I miss you.
I miss you.
So kind of the overview of the day. We got in there. Everyone knew it was coming. I knew Harshman was coming on, and they put their evidence in through Indiana State Police. I forget what his rank is. Master Trooper, I think he is. I think I put Super Trooper in my things to remember that.
Super Trooper.
Super Trooper. So Harshman is who they used to get all of the recorded calls in that were made by Richard Allen while in custody. These were all while he was detained in Westville Penitentiary in the Department of Corrections. And like I said, there were 8 total. There was a little bit of a snafu that I'll talk about when we get to it. One of the calls that McClellan was starting to play was he accidentally had loaded up the wrong call, and it was supposed to be between Richard and his mother, and it started with, "Hey, babe." And I looked over at the person next to me. I said, he calls his mom babe. And then
I was like, they got one of our phone calls?
Yeah, and then I see
I'm like, these motherfuckers.
I see Harshman looking over at McLean, and his eyes are all wide. And then Nick realizes, he's like, "Your Honor, I think, I'm not really good at tech. I think I loaded the wrong call. I mixed them up." So he runs over there and stops it. So we didn't get that call, and that call ended up coming after lunch. Right after lunch, it was the first thing they had done. And I have to tell you, after lunch was just a day of, I guess, backroom haggling between the defense and the state with respect to certain evidence that the state was trying to get in, which I'll go through with you. And it was pretty interesting. It was we weren't privy to what was going on. We knew what the defense was seeking to keep out, and they ultimately were successful in keeping it out. And it was a late ad. It was a late ad by the state. It was something that they were trying to put in a much more recent video of Rick Allen while he's in custody in Cass County, which is where he was transported there when they finally were able to get him moved pursuant to court order shortly before trial. And the judge says, "Well, we'll just keep him there throughout trial." So that's where he's been, and they transport him back and forth daily from Cass County. So apparently there was some kind of video, which obviously we did not get to see, but apparently it was him acting fool. He was angry about something, said something like, "Oh, like McClellan said, it's a video where," and this is outside of the presence of the jury. Obviously, all these types of discussions always take place outside of the jury. All housekeeping, just so you have an understanding, always takes place outside of the presence of the jury. If it's a sidebar, like I said, they put on the white noise, they congregate in that corner, the back corner of the courtroom. And from that point forward, they'll have their discussions, and then they'll come out, and then the judge will move along accordingly, depending on what happened. If it was an objection, she'll make the ruling on the record, and then we'll know. So there was an interesting argument that took place prior to, with regard to these confession calls, and it really, it begs the question, because as I kind of go through the foundation that was laid in terms of getting them in through Harshman, he listened to roughly 700 hours over the course of the last 2 years, from 4 different places. I don't think he heard much when Rick was initially incarcerated. I think when they took him into custody, and then they quickly moved him out to Westville. It was primarily from Westville, Wabash, and then here at the end, Cass County is where he did most of his listening from. But, he claimed he couldn't really put a number on the number of hours. At one point, Nick, and this is in front of the jury when he was making your argument, he says he's listened to hundreds of thousands of hours of phone call. I looked at him, I'm like, hundreds of thousands of hours. I'm like, what? And I think Brad stood up and objected. He's like, he didn't listen to hundreds of thousands of hours of phone calls. That would be impossible. So, like Nick says, okay, I'm sorry. He's like, hundreds of hours of phone calls. So, but this interesting argument, which I really wanted Allie to dig into, and I think, did you get into that argument a bit in your afternoon live?
Well, we discussed the Indiana's completeness doctrine.
Right, which is what the argument was, and essentially,
And we came up with different arguments that could be advanced.
okay. So here, let me flesh out what that argument was, like, a little bit, because I ran out. I didn't know how much time I was gonna have. I called Allie. I'm like, do the research. This is what the issue is. This is what Brad was arguing. So essentially, what Rosie was saying was that, look, the state is going to be playing 2 phone calls from a certain date. Okay. And on this date, there was a phone call at 3:14 a.m. from Rick to his father. Okay. And that he, in that phone call, and so we didn't get to hear this, like, there were no transcripts handed out to the jury for their review, because they were handed transcripts so that they could go along with it, because they were very difficult, as you can imagine, to hear. They do not have the sophisticated system in terms of, they have a big screen, but in terms of sound, it is very, very difficult to hear everything in that courtroom. The acoustics are awful. Many of the witnesses don't speak up loud enough. They have a microphone that McClellan constantly tells them not to lean into and speak into, because that's for the court reporter. He says it projects it out to the gallery, but it's really for the court reporter. And if you're talking into that mic, the lawyers and the judge can't hear you. So what happens is everybody sits back, nobody speaks, because I can hear everybody perfectly when they lean in and speak into the mic. Everybody
Wait,
in the
I have a
gallery.
question. Is it accurate that the other people actually can't hear them? What do they lower their voices when they're talking in the microphone so the judge and the jury can't hear them?
Well, honey, you're an attorney. It's a very nerve-wracking thing to be on the stand. These are not professional witnesses. Even cops, who are what I would consider to be a professional witness, can speak at regular volume, as opposed to projecting more, which they need to do, especially in that courtroom.
I'm just saying, I don't see why they can't do both. Both speak into the microphone and still project.
I agree. I agree. He claims that when they speak into the microphone, he gives the same speech every time a witness takes a stand. Because Nick is very loud. You can hear him crystal. Like, if everybody spoke as loud as Nick does, you'd have no problem.
And if
Everybody
they
be able
did
to
it
hear
into the
everything.
microphone, it would be just louder.
He's claiming that when they speak into the microphone, that the lawyers can't hear them, because
Okay.
they tend to speak lower because they think they're on a microphone.
Right, that's what I was saying, that they
I get
lower
it.
their voice because they think they're using a microphone. His instruction to them could be, Speak into the microphone, but you have to speak loudly as though you're not speaking into a microphone because it's
I
not
think
amplified, you know?
think the rub is that the witnesses would be blowing the court reporter's ears out of her skull because she's
Got it,
listening to the
got it.
microphone. So
Okay.
I think that's what the issue is. All right. So this argument is essentially about context, that this call that takes place at 3:14 a.m. between Rick and his father, wherein we got some of it, that he's like, they're torturing me, they're trying to break me mentally. I feel like I'm in Guantanamo Bay. Like it was, it's like I'm innocent of this. And this is the same day that we hear the first two confessions. So a couple hours prior to this, and just for everybody, just for frame of reference, at this point, Rick Allen is in the throes of his psychotic state. Okay, so everything that you're going to hear today, he is in some form of psychosis, and we know that he is at this point. He's in between his first and second shots of Haldol.
Wow.
We know that he takes a third shot that lasts him into June. We know that he's suffering mentally, psychologically, physically. All these things are going on. And it's like when you're sitting here, especially with Harshman, like hearing Harshman give zero deference to the conditions of this guy's confinement is stunning to me. It's like the lack of humanity to even acknowledge the fact. Harshman had no idea that he was getting Haldol injections. He had no idea what his regimen was. He had no idea if he was suffering from mental illness coming in. He had no idea what his Medicaid, like, so, and they're allowing Harshman, which it took every like fiber of my being to keep my mouth shut in that courtroom when McClelland is asking Harshman, who's a cop who has zero training in
You wanna stand up
anything.
and object.
Oh
"This
my
is an
god,
outrage. This whole courtroom's out of order."
babe, like, you know me, yeah, and I know you. Like, you're worse than I am. Like, I cannot keep you quiet in the courtroom. Like, the one day we were together,
Stop.
you were popping off. I'm like, "You can't do that. We're not
No,
at
I
the
mean, to
table."
you
Y
quietly.
You were not quiet. You were not a
Alright.
quiet one. We are not quiet
Sure.
people. We are loud people.
Sure.
Um So, but just so so Brad's argument is essentially, look, the completeness doctrine, which you went through on your earlier live, essentially explain it again for those who may not have been able to catch the earlier live. What is
Okay.
the completeness
I'm gonna
doctrine?
just put up Indiana's rule. I'll share it because I still have it up. Um, so typically, the rule is used when somebody uses just part of a statement and doesn't put the whole statement in, or part of a conversation, or part of a letter, whatever the case may be. But it also applies to other statements. So let me read it to you. Okay. So, uh, if a party introduces all or part of a written or recorded statement, an adverse party may require the introduction at that time of any other part or any other writing or recorded statement that, in fairness, ought to be considered at the same time.
And that last portion
Well, the
of the
right,
rule is what Rosie really leading into.
correct.
You know,
Yeah,
the concept being that in order it's he was arguing that it's unfair for the jury to hear these two phone calls 2 hours later without having the context of what happened 2 hours prior, where he's professing his innocence, when he's talking about the conditions of his confinement, where he says that they're breaking me, that this is what they've been planning all along, like that this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to break me, to get me to confess. And then hours later, he starts with these confessions. And like, I'll tell you flat out, right from the front side of this thing is that they're all general. I did it. I killed Abby and Libby. I did it. I did it. I killed at it. There is the only confession that we hear ever in the 2 days is the one that was written by Monica Walla that I read you guys last night, wherein he gives some details. It's the thing where he was at my parents' house, and then my sister came and they were going to go to lunch. I didn't want to do it. I went and got the beer. I bought a 6-pack somewhere. Why didn't law enforcement go and try to find where he bought a 6-pack to verify if that actually happened? I wonder why. Like, even like in this day and age, there can only be so many places to buy beer in this area, whether or not they have a point of sale system that might still have records from back then, unknown, but it's worth taking the shot, right? I mean, it's worth trying to validate whether or not he's got some corroborating evidence in that actually happened. That would be pretty powerful evidence for the state. You would think that they would want to try to find it. But so that doesn't happen. But, and then, he goes, I drank 3 of them early. I drank the other 3 later. Doesn't really tell us where that happened. Doesn't talk about a period of time in which that happened. Says he goes home, he bundles up, says he goes out to the trails, says that, at that point, says he lies in wait, says that he sees the girls. He starts to follow the girls, tells the girls to go down the hill. And like, you have to remember the timing of the story. So he says he tells the girls to go down the hill. His intent was to sexually assault them. He says that he sees a van driving on this access road. It scares him.
Wait, did he say driving on this access road, or you just added that because we
I think
know?
I says he sees a van, which scared him.
Right. So
Right.
I'm just
But it
yeah.
could only be on that access
I
road.
understand. That's if you believe that he did it and that he saw the van and that the state, you know what I mean? So you have to say
Yeah,
what
for
he
sure. For
said, which
sure.
was, "I saw a van."
Right. Well, he didn't. This is what Monica Walla wrote down.
I understand. Right.
Like, I don't know if he said any of that.
Right.
What I know is that's what Monica Walla wrote down. But so, he says he cuts the girls' throats. He puts some sticks on them or branches on them. And then he finds his way back to his car, which he says there's no other cars there. And I think that, like, today, they like, there were a few other things that were added. They said he avoided the trails to get back to
Wait,
his
they
car.
played recordings of his
No,
discussions.
this is not one that is recorded. This is not what I'm telling you now is what has become the state's biggest piece of evidence in terms of the confessions, because he talks about the van.
I
They
understand, but if she didn't testify today, how did they get additional facts as to what he told
it's
her?
like, I could not tell you. Like, I was asking the same goddamn thing. I'm like, how are you getting this shit in again through Harshman? Because, like, Nick asked some question. He's like, oh, on when we get to it, he says, on such and such a date, did you read the report by Monica Walla? Like, so, like, they use this other witness to restate this statement by Allen that Walla apparently
I
took
mean,
notes of.
cumulative hearsay
I was saying all those things. I'm like, what is
in your
going
head.
on here? No, to the people next to me. Like, I'm
So out loud. Wow, babe.
well, but I'm whispering. I'm not
Mhm.
like, you just talk
Okay.
lowly. All right.
Double
So,
hearsay, we call that. Yes, Tiffany
right.
Knox.
So,
We call it
so
double hearsay in the law.
they make the argument. Uh, I thought it was a valid, like, Gull called it a novel argument. I don't think it's all that novel. I think it is fair. I think the context is everything. I think
It's literally what the statute says.
I
It's
know, and
literally what it says.
that's what Rosie argued. He's like, I'm not
This
making like I'm
isn't
literally
novel.
reading you the words of
Right.
what it says. There's nothing novel about it. That's what the words of the statute. And she says, I understand, sir, but I'm going to sustain the objection. We're not going to allow it in. She's like, but, and this is the part where it got interesting. She says, well, because McClellan made the argument, well, they can put their client on the stand and they can get in all they want. And Rosie stands up and he says, so, Your Honor, is what you're saying is that my client's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination is going to be pitted against a rule of evidence? Is that what you're asking us to do? So I have to decide whether or not I'm going to put my client on and expose him to cross-examination wherein he has been incarcerated for 2 years and been tortured psychologically. And he didn't say all this, but it was implied. This is
Right.
what I would have been arguing.
But
I have no
they
idea what he's going to do up there.
I forgot to mention this during our live when Kara and I covered this, but since in what world can you get on and introduce your client's self-serving prior statement? I mean, it's hearsay.
It totally is hearsay.
So whether he is on the stand or he is not on the stand doesn't change a goddamn thing.
Right. And so
He
Rosie
got
asked for clarification. So he's like, so are you saying that I can just get these into evidence? And she kept saying what she kept saying exactly is, it's up to you. I'm like, that's not an answer.
and
Like,
it's not up to him. It's up to his client.
well, no, not talking about putting his recorded statements into evidence. What she was not clarifying is if she was going to require Richard Allen to take the stand. That's the part that I was saying, like, you're not giving an answer, because he asked several times. He said, look, like, what does that mean? Does that mean, like, and she does that so I can get him into evidence during our case in chief? She said, that's up to you. But like, Brad didn't ask the question. Like, what I'm trying to clarify, Your Honor, is, do I have to put my client on the stand in order to get him in your world with you, Judge? So she denied it. So we get into the first confessions. And again, remember the overview. This guy is their last witness. These 8 confessions were their last evidence that they put in. They tried to get this other thing in at the end during a redirect, but this is it. This is their case in chief. At this point in time, the state has rested. It's done. Like, everything that you're going to hear evidentiary wise, you have now heard. So I know where I stand on this case. They have not met their burden. I have sat there every single day. I have listened to all of their testimony. I have listened to every single witness that has gotten on that stand. I have closely, and the one thing that can be said by every attorney that is in that room, we're obviously paying attention because we're writing every word. There is no zoning out. Like, we're all on task, so we're diligently listening to every single thing that they're saying. You know what I mean? So, all right. So they call Harshman. Harshman gets up there and he says, he's their phone guy, that he's been maintaining the calls. He was tasked with maintaining the calls from Carroll County, from
All
Westville,
right, yeah,
from
we get all
Wabash,
that.
Cass, 700 calls.
Skip to the call.
Right. See, now, if I were to say that to you, people in the chat would be saying, be nice to Bob, or be nice to Allison. So why do people do, like, I've already seen somebody, like, have I been mean to you?
Today?
Yes.
I mean, ever? No, definitely
I
not
mean,
today. But I was just saying, like, if all that background is I listened to 700 calls and blah, 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 and then nothing of substance, but you're right. Keep going. I shouldn't
okay.
rush you to the
Okay,
juicy.
well, somebody said it's the tone, Bob. Well, that tone that Allison just used with me is the exact same tone. We've been married for a long, long time, y'all.
Bob probably
So
does need
everyone calm down and stay out of her marriage, please. Okay, so the first call, which was from November 14th of 2022. Okay, and it's to wife Kathy. Okay. And really the only reason that they put this in is it's to, like, interpretation with these things is everything. everything, so this is essentially what the heart of this particular the November 14th thing is that it's where Richard says they say their hellos, and he says, if this becomes too much for you, just let me know and I'll call the detectives and I'll tell them whatever they want to hear.
What date and time was that?
So this is like November 14th, shortly after he's arrested. Now, this isn't a confession. This is him trying to protect his wife, saying, if if it is if this is all too much to bear, like at this point, Kathy has lost her job. She's already has to move out of Delphi. Like her life is shattered. And he's saying, if this is all too much for you to handle, because what becomes evident in every single phone call is how much these two people love each other. I
He's like,
mean,
"I'll say whatever I need to and just."
he says exactly what I just said. He said, which
Right.
is, if this becomes too much for you to bear, let me know and I'll call the detectives and tell them whatever they want me to tell them. So it's just like it's like he's implying that whatever they're expecting me to say, like if they tell me what to say, then that's what I'll say, and I'll just end all this shit. So
I mean,
and
that was
that's
more helpful to the defense, if anything.
yeah, he says I'll well, yeah, for sure. Like I felt all of them were helpful for the defense because in every single one of these, he says I've lost my mind. Like every single one of them, he's like, I've like, I don't know what's reality. I've lost my mind. But let's go through them. He's like, I'll tell them whatever they want me to tell them. I love you too much. I can't explain what's going on. Nobody loves me anymore. I'm sorry, babe. Um, he's like, you take care of yourself. Did you get back to work? And then he says they don't want you to. I'm sorry, babe. I love you so much, baby. I just wish I could see you. If anything happens, I'll see you the rest of our lives. I love you, and I love the whole family. So that was a short one. So and again, they're construing those words that he says initially as being a confession. You know what I'm saying? It's like
I'm
that.
dying for the
uh,
jury questions.
And if I go back and try to think of it like if I'm just hearing these without knowing anything that I know about this case and trying to put myself truly in the position that the jury's in, I mean, do I think that that's confession?
Did they redact it, or could you
I mean,
hear
because I
Kathy's
can guarantee you
responses?
the pro guilt people are going to be saying that that's a confession. It's like everything is left to interpretation, right? I mean,
Were those redacted statements, or could you hear Kathy's responses?
oh, so and that was the thing. Every call that we heard today was the full call from you're getting collect call from an inmate and so if you want to accept blah blah blah, and then the hang up. So
Okay,
we heard the every confession that we heard was from the call from beginning to end.
confession.
Yeah. So then we get into the next calls, which I think were April. So the next call that they play was April 3rd at 2023 at 5:14 a.m. All right. And then so they have their
So this is
typical
when he's full in.
he's he's out of his mind here. Like, I mean, this is right. This is like feces eating, feces rubbing all over your body, masturbating in the cell, smashing his head into the wall, like all the things are going on. So it starts with just, the hi honeys, what's going on. And then he says, so Kathy says, what's going on? And Richard says, I just want to apologize to you. And Kathy says, what's going on, sweetheart? Are you not feeling well? And then Richard says, I did it. And Kathy says, "You did what?" He says, "No, I did it." Kathy says, "What?" He says, "I killed Abby. I killed Abby and Libby." And Kathy says, "No, you didn't." And he says, "Yes, I did." And she says, "No, you didn't, dear." He says, "Yes, I did." And Kathy says, "Don't say that. Don't say you did that." And he says, "I don't know why." She said, "No, you didn't." She says, "No, you didn't, dear. This is Kathy. You're not feeling well. There's something wrong." He's like, "I did." Kathy says, "They've messed up your meds or something there." And Rick's like, "No, I evidently did it.
Evidently.
I'm telling you." He says shit like this all the time. Um, Kathy says, "No, you didn't. Why would you say that?" Richard Allen, "Because maybe I did."
Wow,
She
maybe I
said
did.
she says, "No, you didn't, dear." He says, "I think I did." Kathy says, "No, no, you didn't. They're screwing with you there. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. There's something wrong." And and just to preface this, it was really hard to hear. I did the best I could. All of us did in that courtroom. I asked everybody, I'm like, "Were you able to hear every word?" They were like, "No, not." I mean, it's like I really tried to focus on the things that were inculpatory that he said, and if there was anything contextually that I thought that was very important, I tried to, I did the best to trade every word to get every word, but it's hard. The sound system stinks, so it's very difficult. So, uh, so she says, where was I? No, no, you didn't. They're screwing with you there, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. There's something wrong. And then Richard says, I just don't know what to do with. Kathy says, "They're messing with you. They're messing with your mind." And then this is the point that Andrew Baldwin made when he added an argument to the completeness doctrine, talking about that Richard Allen refers to the earlier call that she did not allow uh, in this phone call. Okay, um, so he says, "Did Dad tell you I called?" And she says, "Yeah, yeah." And he asks, "What did I say to him?"
Wow.
And she says, "I don't know. I talked to your mom, but she called me and we're just worried about you because there's something not right." And then he says, "Is there a way to talk to Dad?" She says, "No, honey, I'm not with them right now, and there's something wrong. They're screwing with you there." What did I say to Dad? He says. Now I'm going to remind you, we heard it. Were you trying to reach me?
Oh, I think I did that by accident.
Oh. Um, so and then he says, uh well, he just kept asking, "What do I say to Dad?" And she says that like maybe they did something to your food or they've done something to your meds, but there's something wrong. And she says, "Don't ever say anything because I know you didn't," or something to that effect. And then he says again, like, this is the shit that I'm like, I know, like, he says, "I think I did." And she says, "No, you didn't. Why are you saying that?" And he says, "I just, because I think I did." And she's like, "No, you didn't, dear." And then he says, "I wish I could say I didn't. I don't know." And
All
then
right, so what is his voice sounding like when he's saying that? Is it like I mean, do it like the way it sounded.
he sounded very like somber, kind of, not in a way like not a voice of regret, like, because they're trying to make him sound like he's like he's sounding like, "Oh, I can't believe I did that." He sounded just robotic almost, but not quite robotic. He sounded like an individual who simply cannot get his mind to work right. like who just is not remembering things, who's things are not functioning for him normally. I mean, you could tell. I mean, I said yesterday, there's no way I'm going to be able to do because I heard it once. His voice was like, as we progressed later, I can tell you, he got more melancholy sounding to me. Like he was his tone was lower, and he sounded more defeated. Like the word that I would use is defeated because that's what he sounded like to me. Like this didn't see. This is why
So
the whole
when he
world should
says
know this.
like, "So I wish I could say I didn't, I don't know." Is it all the same tone? Is he having effect like in his voice? Like,
No, no, he never changes his tone. He never becomes adamant. Like when she says, "No, you didn't," he never says, "I did though. I did." There's no change in tone. He's never raising his tone. He never gives her resistance when she says, "No, you didn't." It's always just him, same tone throughout the entire conversation. Does that make
okay.
sense?
Yeah.
So when Kathy comes at him and says, "No, you didn't," he's like, "But I did. You're not listening to me. You're like that kind of thing never happens here." I was sitting there trying to think. I'm like, if I'm out of my mind, and if I am trying to confess, if I did do it, and if I'm out of my mind, am I going to have the ability to be able to say, "Allison, you're not listening to me. I know you don't want to hear this. I know this is the hardest thing that I've ever had to say to anybody ever about anything in my entire life. But I'm telling you, I don't know what came over me, but I did this thing they're accusing me of." Like, there's never a conversation like that. And Rick Allen is an articulate guy. Like you hear him in the 2 days, like he's a smart dude. Like he's capable of having that conversation with his wife, the woman that he has loved for decades. If he's truly trying to, this sounds like I'm gonna say the bare minimum that I need to say in order to get these things out so that they transfer me out of here, or so that I can actually see my wife for the first time in 7 months. They'll let her visit. Because like when you said that to me yesterday, that was like, man, like that's it. Like it's not a situation where I think that they had to threaten him. I think it was the opposite, that it was the benefits. It's like, look, dude, do you want to keep doing, how long do you want to do this that you're doing right now? All you got to do is admit to it. We'll let you see Kathy. We're going to get you out of this hellhole, and it's like that's the feeling that I get, that like, but I had pretty much reached a decision yesterday coming into today that the state hadn't met their case, or their burden. And is that the same things as me thinking that he didn't do it? I think at this point, yes. Like, I just don't think he's the guy. I just don't. I honestly don't. And it's hard to do in the face of this, but you can't, like, I just, like, I can't wait for this jury to start deliberating on this case. 'Cause I'm just, it's like everybody that's covering it is so deep into it, except for the noobs that are coming in. But it's like you and I'm looking at their evidence, and I'm like, what I can't help but strip away the confessions and then look at the strength of their case.
Right, because it sounds like at least the part that you've gone through right now, like, that he's convincing himself that he did it, like, "Evidently, I did it. It seems like I did it," like, that he's convinced, and if you're, like, been stuck in that cage and everyone's, screaming at you, it's like, I can imagine feeling like, "I I must have done this and I don't remember," like, I wouldn't be here if I didn't do this, like, this would not be happening at some point after, 4 months of not sleeping. I was watching, horrible movie last night, but there was one of the guys was in prison and the word comes from other way up and they're like, "Break him." And then I turned to Scarlett and she's like, "What's that mean?" I'm like, "They're gonna start pounding and keeping him awake and turning on the lights," which is literally exactly what happened, like, then you just see the guard go over, they start pounding on the walls, they turn on the lights, and it's the same thing that I mean, we've had other clients complain about too, that you just can't you're like, "Is this really happening or is this person crazy?"
Right. Well, and neither of us have ever experienced psychosis, so it's impossible for us to know, like, that concept of being able to decide and to make a distinction between what's real and what's not, what's reality and what's not. I
Right.
mean, that's a pretty scary position to be in. And and that's exactly where this guy was, and he's got everybody in the world. Because remember, I cannot stress this enough that what they do in a situation like this where they put him in and they essentially cut him off from any kind of contact with his wife beyond the tablet, because what comes out is that for the first 5 or 6 months, like, leading up to this, the period of confessions, he wasn't able to make the calls. His tablet, like, he couldn't charge his tablet, or there was always some issue. They closed him off from isn't like anybody that you could consider to be a support staff in order to break him. So, I don't get, like, kind of the feedback that I'm always hoping for, because I hope that you'll add in, but I'm trying to explain, like, when I went to
Me?
go visit like, when I went to go visit Christopher Vaughn, because there's a big movement on that guy's case, and when he was telling me that when they put him in and they just shut, like, in custody after they decided that he had done it, and that they closed him off from everybody that would be considered support, moral, emotional, mental, any kind of support. And so you're left in a cell, stripped away from everything that you've ever known in terms of life on this planet, and you're left to your own devices, and you're in solitary where you're not having any kind of communication with anybody. Like, it's like I'm trying to build this out so that people have an understanding that this shit's real. That it's something that actually happens, and, like, anybody that has any family or friends that suffer from actual mental illness, they know. They know. I mean, our former brother-in-law went through some shit.
Yeah, we kinda, like, watched it happen from literally the point where he remembered something traumatic that happened in his childhood and then just broke.
Yeah, well, but when he broke, like, the paranoia part of it in terms of was very real.
Right,
The shit with our friend from law school, when she disclosed to us what happened to her, it was real. Like,
right.
she really believed that people were chasing her, trying to kill her. It was like there was no part of it in her mind that was not actually happening. Like, that person's reality is the reality. And when you're in there and they're coming at you nonstop, I could like, this made so much sense to me that he's confused. Like, maybe I did do this, so
Right, that's what
uh,
I was thinking, and then, right before you just get back into it, there was one thing that someone asked, which, like, "Do we know if any of these guards were the guards that had the patches on it?" And it got me thinking, this defense should call the guard that got the damn tattoo.
they did. Well, I think that guy
Well, you would have
testified.
seen it, wasn't it on his face? The tattoos.
No, they were claiming that he put makeup over it. I
What?
ran in I so he was the last witness to testify. It was a break. I ran out, and I forget what I went to go do. I ran out somewhere. I think I actually ran out of on, so, like, I
The
took the
defense should have
opportunity.
asked him, "Do you have makeup over a tattoo?"
Well, like, to what end? They can't even mention Odinism. They can't
I
even
know, but it
say the
still
word.
goes to his, credibility. Do you
But
believe
what you're
someone
gonna
who
ask him, "What's it a tattoo of?" and he's going to say Norse paganism, and then the state's going to object, and they're going to say you can't bring that up. It's crazy. It's like this whole concept of her shutting that thing down completely just is mind
I
boggling
would
to
have made
me.
the argument that the type of person that would put a tattoo that means that on their face that is someone that you can distrust or something. I don't know.
Right. So,
But you ran out after him.
and I saw him. I was like feet away from him, and like somebody had already told me that he was doing this makeup thing. So like I'm looking at him, and I'm like, do I see makeup, like foundation or some shit on there? And I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell. The one thing I could tell is that he was wearing these glasses when he was testifying. He was not wearing them when he was outside of the courthouse.
Mm.
So that was strange. Um, so this thing's almost over. This confession. So Kathy says something to the effect like there's something wrong. And then he says, I just wish they'd kill me or let me apologize to the families. And then Kathy shuts it down. She's like, nope, no more. She's like, I gotta try to get a hold of somebody there because something's going on with you. All right. So that was from 4/2 of 23, 5:14 a.m.
Wait, I was looking at your notes that you sent me, and after did you say that you wrote something like Kathy says, there's something wrong, like after before um like they're trying to mess with you or something, and then I can't read what you wrote, and it says I don't know if you read that part, I guess.
Um,
Was
like
it
what towards the end?
Yeah, it was, right before right before right before the part about, apologizing. Like, Kathy said something like, I think they're messing with your mind or
Oh, something like they're screwing with you. They're trying to get you to say things and trying to mess with your head or mind. I couldn't. And he said, I guess, which was really hard to hear. I have to be honest, I'm guessing that that's what he said. It was like, it was like, I wrote down, I guess. And then that's when she's like, there's something wrong. And then
Alright.
he says the rest. So, I mean, look, dude, I did the best I could. I did the best I could. Um, okay. So then the second one that they put in is from same day. So that's April 3rd. And this one is at 8:45 a.m. So this is a few hours after the last one that we just heard. Okay. And so at this point, it is again, they have their pleasantries. And but like kind of right away, he says, Kathy, he's like, you got to get me out of here. And Kathy's like, yeah. And he's like, what's going on? And then she's like, what? He's like, did I call you this morning? So he can't remember. So this is 8:45. He called her at what was the time on the last one? 5:14.
5:14.
So 5:14 a.m. This is and this is what I'm trying to say with respect to the context is everything. Like you can't like you have to listen to every that's why I really, really wanted so much to be able to take down like every single word because every single word matters. So she says, did I call you this morning? And she says, yes, you did. You did. And he says, oh my God. And then he says, did I call dad last night? And then she says, don't panic, okay? And like they always refer to each other as honey and baby. Like so like I didn't write it down on every single one, but like they like every time that they address one another, every single time it's always honey and baby or babe. So she says, don't panic, okay? And he's like, hun, And then she's like, honey. And then he's like, oh God. And then she's like, it's okay. And he says, I had the worst dream last night. And she says, it's okay. He says, what's going on? He's like, now, and then he didn't finish the sentence. And then he says again, you got to get me out of here, hon. And she says, listen. She's like, I know, honey. And then she's trying to comfort her some more. And he says, I haven't touched the water.
What?
Yeah. And she says, I know. He says, I haven't touched the water, the coffee. And she says, I know, they need to test you. He says, no.
Oh, they must have been telling him, "Don't drink the water." Maybe it's something they're putting in your water.
Right.
Oh.
Ah. She's like,
Because I was like, "Why isn't she saying, 'What the hell do you mean you didn't touch the water?'" But she
right.
said, I know they need to test you?"
That's what she said. They need to test you. And then he says again, no water. And then she says, okay. He says, the water, the coffee. And he's like, I'm losing my mind, hon. And then she says, listen to me. He says, no. She's like, I know, honey. She's like, listen to me, okay? And he says, all I remember is I had the most horrible dream. So he says that again. And she says, okay. And he says, and now listen. He says, the next thing I remember is you telling me to hang up. That's what you told me. And she says, that wasn't a dream. She says, it wasn't a dream. He says, what's going on? And she says, I think they changed your meds, honey, or something. They've done something to you. And I'm working on it. And she said, I'm going to have somebody come up. And he says, I can't. And then he says, I don't know if I'm going to trust the lawyers when they get here because I don't know if they're really my lawyers.
Wait, what was the date, and is this close in time when they took his lawyers off? I gotta be right back. Sorry.
Um, yeah, so this is, I think that at this point they had been reinstated. I think. No, no, this is still when, because that all went down September. When did the OA take place? Somebody in the chat. Um, so then he says, and she says, you need to. She says, no, they are. And he says, huh? And she says, you need to. They are. And then he says, I need to. He says, listen to me. He said, somebody in my family has to prove that to me. They're going to have to talk over the phone or something. And she says, I can do that. He says, okay, I won't talk to anybody. And then she's like, just have them call me. He says, and then he's like, unless somebody in my family is here, I will not talk to anybody. And she's like, get them on the phone if you can. And then he says, if I don't see you again, will you please tell everybody I love them? And she says, absolutely, you will. And he says, okay. And then he asks, did I talk to dad last night? And she says, yes, you did. And she says, I don't know what you talked about though. And he says, I gotta go. And she says, it's not a dream. She says, I love you. I said, I don't know. He said, I hope I'll see you again. And then they the call ends. So, I mean, at this point, did anybody so January 20, so yeah, this is this is the beginning of the case. So like the the Frank's memo wasn't even filed at this point. So like he's talking about Brad and Andy.
So he's just confused in general without any reason.
Well, what do you mean without any reason?
Well, I mean, like, it'd be different if he made that statement around the time that there was confusion about who his lawyers were.
Yeah, no, I mean his lawyers are his lawyers at this point for 5 months.
Right.
We know that they had dropped off his
Right,
discovery,
I wasn't thinking, yeah.
but and then he's like, like you had to go away, but it was like I need somebody in my family to like talk to them so that I know I can trust it.
Wow.
I mean, he's like incredibly paranoid. You know, I just don't know how you can trust anything like this if you're the jury. I just don't. I don't. Like I'm so thankful that there's an actual psychologist on that jury because they're going to know. I mean, anybody who works with patients that have any kind of mental illness and has seen it and dealt with it is going to know.
So, were the jurors taking notes?
Well, they didn't need to because they had the
Oh, the
transcript,
transcript. So they're seeing this evidently and all that. Okay, that's
right?
good.
Yeah, they're seeing every word of it, I'm assuming. So, the next one they play is from all right, I want to get this right. So May 10th, 2023, 11:05. So we have the November 22nd, we have the April 3rd, two calls, and then this is May 10th. So this is just to give you an idea of the time frame that these all happen. And there's nothing after. So when he stops taking the Haldol, that's when all this stops. Like
Who testified about when he took I didn't hear you
Monica
ever tell us
Lala.
that.
Yes, you did. Weren't you on
On the
my lap?
dates that she took, the dates that he was given Haldol and
Not
stuff?
not the exact dates. She gave
Right.
like around the time frame, but we know that he was on his Haldol by because like it was like, but she actually didn't say when he took his first shot. Didn't even give us, and the defense didn't pull it out. But what I think is going to happen is the defense is going to have their own expert come on who had access to his records. And I think that they're going to have that expert testifying because I mean, the defense isn't going to do. They wanted to make sure that the jury got an idea of how unethical she was and how little she knew about his his regiment of medicine and and like they weren't trying to make her sound any more competent than there needed to be, that she needed to be in terms of their eyes. So this one is May 10th of 2023. And again, it's they have their hellos and they each say it's good to hear your voice. And then Kathy asks him, how you doing? He says, I wrote down, I might be now, which doesn't really make sense in conjunction with what she asked him. And then she said that I'm supposed to be meeting Brad to sign something. So she's like, I don't know what that was about. But she asked, are they going to move you? And he says, I don't know.
Hmm.
And then she says, all right. And then he says, I think maybe I'm losing my mind, but I'm not sure. And then Kathy's like, no, no, no. And then she asks, are they allowed to call you? Or have you been able to, uh, and I don't know if she said see them. I think talking about the lawyers. And then he says, this is the part where it gets weird. And she says, yeah, I'm right here.
Wait,
And he's,
your note says something like, it looks like you wrote they they allowed you to call, or you've been able to. You've been able to. Like like he hasn't called her in a while. Like she's asking if
well, they said the things early on, like it's good to hear your voice.
right, so that would go with that. Because what you like, when I'm looking at it, you're right, you wrote
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying where so they allow you to call, right? Not the lawyers, her.
right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes way more sense. Yes. Okay. So um he says that it's like this is the part where it's gonna get weird. And she says, I'm right here. And then he says, she says, what's going on? He said, I don't know. It's like I just think maybe I lost my mind. And she says, we've all lost our minds at this point. And so he says, so Brad and Andy, then can I trust them? And she says, yes, you can. Let's not talk about anything. He's like, how do I know? She said, there are lawyers. There are lawyers. He's like, well, I need to tell you something anyway. And she says, are you sure you want to talk to me over the phone? He says, I think I have to. And I put that in quotes. She says, okay. He says, I need you to know that I did this.
Alright, so how is his voice? Like,
Same. Like his voice never changes. He's like,
so is
there's
it like, "I need you to know I did this," like,
yes,
it
it's
sounds meaningful?
monotone. Huh?
Well, I'm
No,
saying in a
like
way that sounds like meaningful.
it wasn't meaningful. He sounds like that's what I'm saying. He's monotone. There's no fluctuations in his voice ever. He sounds the exact same throughout the entire conversation. He never sounds like you never can hear joy. You can never hear sad. And you can hear happiness and joy in somebody's voice, right? Like you never hear any of this. You don't hear sorrow or anything. He's just saying everything like matter of factly, like everything though, not just when he's saying I did it. Everything that he's saying is always at the same tone and it's always at the same volume. And like there's no fluctuations. It's all very flat. It's a flat speech pattern. He sounds like a guy that's like lost touch to me. It's really disturbing. It's disturbing. Like there's so um he says, I need you to know I did this. And Kathy says, no, you didn't. She's like, there's no way. There's no way. He's like, I hope you still love me. She says, there's no way. Okay. He said, I hope you still love me. She says, I'm always going to love you, but you have not done anything. And I think you are not well. So you don't need to be saying you don't need to be saying you did something that you didn't do, I think. He says, Richard says, this is the first time I've been able to talk to you and I've been trying forever. And then she says, were you not allowed to call me? He's like, I don't know what's going on. She says, okay. He's like, I'm definitely going to lose my mind now, though. And then she talks about having to meet Brad. And so she says, like, I don't know what's happening. And then he says that I've been asking for personal visits. And then, and that's, and those, they're not doing it, or they're not going, they're not doing it, or they're not going through. And then she says, yeah, he's like, yeah. And he said, and it's taking me, feels like it's taking me forever, which I don't know what that means. And then it's, and then she asks, are you there? He says, I'm here. He says, I'm just trying to be at peace with things. And then he says, I had a dream that I needed to let you go, and I didn't know how to let you go. And then Kathy's like, well, you're dreaming stuff again. That's all it is.
One way to let her go is to convince her you did this.
Right. She said, don't be talking about anything on the phone that's negative like that. And then he says, but I have to let you know that I did it. And she says, no, you didn't. There's no way. There's no way. And then the phone disconnects. All right. So, I mean, what are you thinking so far?
I think that I mean, like, you're not giving me anything about, like, other than he's monotoned, but based on
What
just
else? I can't, like, how else do you want me to explain it?
I don't know.
What does monotone sound like? So it's the opposite of me,
Right,
where
no, I know what
my voice is
monotones sound
fluctuating.
like, it's just like, I don't know.
He sound
What did you think looking at the jurors? How do you think they responded?
I think everybody was riveted listening to every word, trying to figure out if these were legit confessions or not, or if this is a guy who's been tortured into confessing. That's what I think that they were doing. I think that they're, I mean, it's going to be a matter of how much weight they give these things, because everything that we heard today, like I said, there's nothing that's specific, nothing. The
Right.
only thing that was ever specific is the thing that Walla wrote.
And Walla's interviews were recorded or were not?
Not. And she didn't keep her
Yeah, I know, I remember.
notes. All right, so, the next one is May.
There's
So I
another
think that
one?
there were 8 total.
Oh, wow.
So this one is, uh, 10 minutes later, same date, May 10th. And again, they have their typical, like, he always says Ricky, like, that's obviously what she calls him. Like, so, like, when he records his voice and she hears, it's hard. So I see that question there, Helen. It's hard to know because on some of them, we heard you have the 1 minute remaining, and it's an automatic disconnect. Like, that's how prison phones work, like any kind of jail phones when you're talking through the system. So that one definitely was a prison disconnect because I noted that we heard the you have 1 minute left thing. So that one was a disconnect from the prison.
I wanna ask the people, we've got a lot of people here, I don't know if we can do it as a poll. If you let's just go based on just, like, the last one, for example, uh, discussion, the conversation that Bob just, uh, played out for us. When he says, whatever he said about, I had a dream, I have to let you go," or something like that. If you're on the jury, are you picking up on that specific sentence and saying, like I did, that could be why he's trying to convince her he did it. I need you to know I did it because that's how to let her go by her thinking he is a murderer. Is that if you were the jury or when you heard that, did that come to your mind? Does that ring true for you? And do you think that the jurors will, because they're gonna be back there able to read this, that they'll pick up on that, and that might, be something that they say that could be why he's saying it. Let's see what you guys are saying back here.
I mean, I could
Probably not
never.
even listening to me. They're all talking
I
to each other.
I couldn't like type that out on a like. How would I type that out on like a poll?
You can't. I'm just looking at what they're saying uh in the comments here. I saw one yes, Moon Goddess. So Cubic Z Painter says no. I think he's answering me like that. He wouldn't pick up on that. Um
Okay. All right. Let me see.
Elena says yes. Well, it's coerced, but Fifi says it occurred to her.
All right.
Trevor's like everybody made that connection. Come on. He's like, that's anybody would think that. Well, I hope that's how it is with the
All right. So, okay. So kind of the first thing he says in this, again, we're May 10th, 11:15 a.m. The first thing of substance he says is, I need to know if you still love me. She says, yes. And he says, and everybody else will as well.
I'm sorry, what was the date? May.
May
Same. Sorry.
10th,
Got it.
11:15. So this is 10 minutes after the last call. Because he says, I may have to spend the rest of my life here. And she says, stop talking about it. It's not true. It's like, I don't understand. It's like, I just got to know that everybody's still going to love me. She says, I love you. It says, because I might only be able to see you one last time. Do you get what I'm saying?
That he's gonna kill himself.
And she says, no. And then if you want to, yes, which I don't get. And then it's true, honey. No, it's not. Yes, it's true. No, it's not. You're not well. I'm well. No, you're not. Yes, I am. I
So is
just
he getting a little bit more like you are? Yes, I am.
no. He's
Okay. Staying flat. I got you.
every single one of these 8 conversations, he's flat the entire time. He never gets adamant. He never gets he never projects louder. He never gets he's never trying to convince, like, there's never a convincing tone. There's never a it's with him speaking adamantly about something. It's like none of those things ever happen. It's just it's flat. It's flat. And so at this point, he says, yes, it's true. She says, no, it's not. You're not well. He's like, I'm well. He's like, I just hope that you'll still love me because I might get the electric chair, or if I get the death penalty. And she says, that's not going to happen. He says, if it does, will you be there for me? She says, yes, that has nothing to do with it. I'm still going to come and see you. Do what? That was the only part when he said, like, I remember this when he said, do what? Like, that was the only time, like, that thing that I say that kind of like people in the Midwest and rural areas that do what? Like, when he
So
said, do what? Like, that was
he's
the
like
only time.
he was like, wait, you're still gonna visit me? This was me breaking it off with you. You're like that kinda like he was surprised that that was her answer?
Yeah, she said he's after he said, "Do what?" She's like, "Nothing. This isn't right. They messed you up so bad." He's like, "It's okay. I did it." She says, "No, you didn't." Now Kathy's getting adamant, but she's crying. Like Kathy is crying every time he starts like she's sitting here listening to the man that she has loved for decades, who's broken, who's like admitting to things that like she in her heart doesn't believe that he did, you know? I mean, she
And
doesn't
she's
like
answering his calls because she knows he needs her because you know that lawyers have got to be telling her,
oh
"You
yeah,
can't stay on the
right.
phone."
See and that's the bigger part of this conversation, really, because that's exactly what's going on. Like at this point in time, she has been instructed by the attorneys, do not maintain conversations with him. You have to put like you have to steer him away when you're getting the sense that he's going to start talking about this shit
Or hang up
or hang up. But he needs to hear her voice, otherwise he's going to
and
break
go
down even
crazy.
more. It's like
Right.
it's like it's a no-win situation for Kathy. What is she supposed to do? Like is she supposed to turn her back on him when he needs her most?
Right.
And at the same time, she's got this dilemma that she can't continue to have the phone call take place when he starts saying the shit that he's saying. It's like, man, like, just, like, sitting next to her when, like, she was, like, listening to these things in court was heartbreaking. Like, I was crying on the first one, and then I, like, and I was and it's like I that's a hard position to be in because, I can feel the empathy. I have so much empathy for what she's going through right now, and it's, like, such a brutal thing. It's I keep saying that every part of this process is so painful for everybody that it affected personally, it's like everybody, like every single person that was affected personally by this case. It's just the whole thing is a lot, and it's like, and you're in this courtroom and you've got, the family for the girls over there on one side, and then you've got Richard Allen's family on this side, and you've got just kind of the press in the front row, and you've got just the rest is filled in with the 23 or 24 seats of people that are actively following this case, and then it's and I'm sitting there listening, and I can hear different reactions as things are said from different people, so it's like you're kind of hearing what people are thinking in terms of the noises that they're making at the times that they're making them. You know what I mean? It's like
So you got noises of people thinking, "Oh, he just confessed straight up," and noises of
right,
people thinking that's absurd? You're
right,
like, okay.
right, exactly. That there's like people that are hearing and that believe that he's the guy are like
There, he's said it.
it's not even that. It's like I heard some people that I know are like guilters like crying, like out of relief that they're hearing that he confessed to doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like that, like it doesn't matter in terms of public opinion what this jury decides. It's not going to matter because if he's acquitted, they're still going to think the people that think that he did this are still going to think that he did this. The people that don't believe that he did this are still, even if he's found guilty, are still not going to believe that he's the guy. And at the end of the day, what that leaves us with is two families that are left without answers. I mean, because in all honesty, I don't know how they pick up their ball if he's acquitted and try to go back into it. I mean, it's like that nightmare of the prospect of this thing never getting solved if he's
I mean, they would
acquitted.
literally need to hire private investigators.
the
'Cause
families.
this yeah, 'cause this the state's never gonna admit it was somebody else,
Right. I
ever.
mean, they're locked in. I mean, they've been locked in. They've been locked in for since the minute they put cuffs on them. There was no backing out. And there's lawyers out there that are hearing about this case from all walks of life. Like when they're hearing the details of it, including prosecutors are like, man, I never would have gone forward on these facts, which
Even
is
Vinny's not buying it, he was a prosecutor.
he was, and it's all I've ever said about this case. Again, if you strip away the confessions, which we can't in reality, they're very much a critical piece of evidence for the state. But when you strip that away, and you can go back and look at our content from what has it been? 2 years? How long have we been making content on this? I think originally I was just doing straight podcasts, and then we started to go back to my original podcast, like that isn't on YouTube, and hear what I say. You'll hear what I said. I said that this probable cause, if they don't come up with any more evidence, that this case does not even come close to allowing the state to meet their burden. It's not mere presence at the bridge when he's volunteered the information in a story, a theory of the state is not enough to convict somebody for these types of crimes. I'm sorry. It's just not that spent casing, the unspent casing that is that she could not duplicate it by just racking the gun. She couldn't do it. She could not make the same marks by racking she had to fire the weapon in order to create a mark that she considered to be sufficiently in agreement.
Right. And again, for anyone who missed it, Barb McDonald was on Vinny, and she's been, deep in the community and the law enforcement and the families for, years, has said long before Richard Allen was ever arrested, it had been widely discussed in the community and amongst law enforcement that the perpetrator was likely interrupted by Weber when he came home. So this is not a bombshell. This fan is definitely not a bombshell. Plus, I'll just say it again, you don't get interrupted at 12:30, but not commit the unaliving until an hour and a half later to get seen by Sarah Carball at 3:57 PM. I mean, that
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like that's where that part of their van theory doesn't add up. Now the state ends up leaning into that so heavily because when we started the live, that's the one thing in that statement that they say that Waller wrote down that he said that van thing is the one thing that the state is claiming was not accessible to Allen in terms of the discovery, which means that his lawyers wouldn't have known it and Allen couldn't have known it.
the whole community knew it though.
Right.
So,
But does that I mean,
but the jury doesn't know that.
but do we know how deep
The jury do
Richard Allen was like digging into the case or Kathy was digging into the case? You know what I mean? Like, were they watching court TV? Or was this like, are you saying
I think that was
community,
in the
like just
community. I
everybody in
don't
the
know if it was
community
in
was
court
talking about
TV. It was amongst the people in the community that was, like, the theory. I have no idea if it was on court TV, but I
Yeah,
guess
I don't
nobody's
I don't
Barb's
know
on court
either,
TV.
but, like, that's kind of one of the things that would have been nice for how candid she would have been with respect to what she was
Agreed.
telling him, because we know she was in Reddit, and Reddit is where you find all this shit. Like, Reddit is where the deep divers were in this case and where most of the speculation and theories and all that other stuff, that's where you're gonna find it. Like, that's where you find this kind of stuff, and we know she was in there.
I mean, you got a lot of people here all saying the same thing. Walla knew, Walla knew, Walla knew. It was all over social media.
I mean, I hate to think that a licensed psychologist would go so far as to add something to something one of her patients said which she knows down the road are going to be used in litigation, that can swing the case. I mean, that concept is horrifying to me. It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable. I mean, I'm firmly of the position that she is an agent of the state. If she's working in that facility, like I don't know what her directives
I
are.
mean, I just don't I've never had a pretrial detainee getting such, one-on-one like, even getting therapy. I've never even heard of such a thing. I've never even heard of such a thing. So giving them medicine every so often for mental health, yeah, but actually talking to them and giving them treatment, I think that was all set up for with that she was given a job. You gotta get him to say whatever, you know?
Yeah, when that was happening, when I heard she was going to be taking the stand, like I had said, and I thought I said to you, I'm like, I hope, because I knew that she had been terminated from Westville. I didn't know if she was still working for Centurion, which is actually either merged with another company, but it's taken on another company's name, but it's the same company. Yeah, so I didn't know if she was still employed with them. I was hoping that she wasn't, because at that point my mindset was, all right, well, I hope she's going to come in here and just be honest, But like, the state would have prepped her, like the state wouldn't have called her, like they would have known if she was gonna whistle blow, you know, they wouldn't have put her on the stand. Now the state wouldn't have put her on the stand, but the defense would have, certainly, But all right, so okay, so this was a major thing for me right here. All right, this portion coming up. So he says the thing where Kathy says they messed you up so bad. And he says, "It's okay. I did it." She says, "No, you didn't." He says, "I did it." She says, "Stop." He says, "I cannot stop. I've got somebody here listening to me right now."
Shut up. Shut up. Which
Mhm.
day is this?
This is the same day, May 10th, 10 minutes after.
And was that Walla? Do we know who that was?
We don't know. We
They
don't
didn't
know.
ask on
Who are they going to ask?
I don't know. I guess that guy wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
I can't stop. I have someone listening
I
to me.
got somebody listening. I got somebody here listening to me right now.
All right, we need another poll. So that's gotta be something everyone's saying, "Yeah, the jurors are all going to" that's gonna to me, that takes away from everything.
Right. So she says, and then she says, "No, that you didn't," which I don't know. He says, "I don't." And then Kathy asks, "What are you doing?" He says, "I killed Abby," and then you can't understand him. And she says, "No, you didn't. Stop. Stop saying that. Stop saying that you did it. No, you didn't." And then he says, I knew I was supposed to let you go. I was
Yep.
trying to let you go."
Yep.
And she says, "Stop. We're going to be back together." And then this is another one where they get the warning. So 1 minute. And then she says, "You didn't do that." He says, "I hope you're always going to love me."
I'm supposed to let her
And
go,
she
but
says,
oh,
and he says, "No matter what, we always love me." And then Kathy says, "Who's with you? Who's with you? Who's with you? Who's with you?" She asked 4 times. And she said, "You need to stop talking. If your lawyer's not there, you need to stop talking. Who's with you? Who's with you?"
ah,
Cuts out. So that was the thing. That was like the thing right there. Like when I heard that one, I'm like, because remember, just so people understand, this isn't like if you're envisioning him out on like when you're watching TV shows and you see the inmates out there lined up by the old phones. This ain't that. Like he has a tablet, so he's in his cell. So
Oh, right. That's right. That's how he's
so
making calls at 3 in the morning.
right.
So yeah, I can't someone's with me right now, like, that person, like, is expecting me to say these words.
So the question that I have, we're talking about, it would be hundreds and hundreds of hours, 24 hours a day, because remember, there's a video in there that runs 24/7. I'm wondering if the defense, they like, I
I
don't like,
surely hope so. I mean, it would be the first video I'd be looking to. I'd want to go to May 10th at whatever time that was.
right,
Absolutely. You kidding me? I'd
right.
be looking at the videos before all of these calls. Absolutely, positively. I would have somebody looking through every call the 2 days before each phone call to see any time it looks like the person at the like that he's being communicated to by someone outside of his cell. Hmm.
All right.
Is there another one?
Yeah, there is. So okay, so this is the part where McClellan was gonna play one from May 17th of 2023. He starts it, and it was supposed to be Rick with his mom, Janice. And he starts the play, and he says, the first thing is, uh, "Hey, babe," and I'm like, "What?" I'm like, that can't be, like, that can't be his mom." And so, and then, like, I see Harshman on the stand, and he's like, "I think, you've got the wrong one playing." So McClellan jumps up from the table. He's like, "Oh my god." He's like, "Yeah, I have the wrong one." He runs over there to stop it. Because I mean, the state is being extremely careful about cherry picking out of hundreds of hours of phone calls, 8 occasions where he's made statements against an interest. So, like, I just want you to think about that part of this. We're talking hundreds of hours, and they picked these situations all in this April, May, June timeframe when he's saying this stuff. I mean, that's gotta have weight, right?
It's gotta, yeah. But I
I
don't
mean,
know that I mean, they can kinda point that out in their closing. I'll be right back.
okay,
I'll be listening while I'm gone.
okay. Um, all right, so essentially after that gets screwed up, we take a break. And so we all got to stretch our legs for a minute and go relax. And at that point, we come back up, and he's got another one queued up. And the next one that we hear is from June 5th of 2023. So we've had two from April, two from May, and then we have one from this next one is, like I said, June 5th. And I think the time on that is, let me see if I think the time on June 5th was, I don't have that written, so I'm not sure what time this June 5th call was. For some reason, I didn't write. I was writing a time on all of them. Maybe they didn't give it.
June 5th?
Yeah, June 5th. I didn't see that I wrote a time down, so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they didn't delineate the time
There
because
wasn't 2 calls on the same day.
yeah, exactly. All right. So you've got your hellos. Now I will say that Rick's still monotone, flat, but that at this point he's speaking lower. He sounds more distant. He sounds more out of it to me. He sounds more depressed. He sounds more defeated. Like he just like that. You could hear the defeat in his voice. Like he sounds like a guy with no hope. He's just, it's like it's the best way to describe it, you know? And so
Your notes are amazing. I hope you guys are out there telling people they're not getting a better, play-by-play than here.
so it's
So proud.
so they say hello, and Rick says, "You still there?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm here." She says, "Oh." And then Kathy, and I remember this, like she's like, because when Kathy's initially at the beginning of the conversation, she's trying to sound happy, and then she probably is happy to hear his voice. And then it immediately, as soon as she hears him speaking, the best way that I could put it is by Kathy's reactions to her husband and the way that he sounds. Like her temperature at the beginning is always optimistic. Oh, hi, hon. Like she's like, oh, and then she makes a little. She says to him after he says, oh, she says, you need to get some coffee, and then chuckles because he sounds like he's like, yeah. She's like, go get your coffee or snack, so whatever you need." And then he says this interesting thing. He says, "I hate spending money when I don't even know where it came from." And Kathy's like, "It doesn't matter. It's in there." She's like, "Somebody's thinking of you." So
That he got money either for because you
no, he's just talking about on like wherever on like the commissary, I guess.
right, commissary, but plus you also need to have money on your account to make phone calls.
Right. Yeah, which by the way, every time you like hear the beginning of it, it always tells what his balance is. He's always got like around $20 in there, like 18, 16, 20. I think he'd like, so it's like they always tell you what his balance is. And he says, so Kathy's basically like I just kind of paraphrased it. She was like, um, she was talking about something not related. She was talking about like a personal thing, which like something about clothes. And he says, "Yeah." And she says, "It's stupid." She's like, "So what did you have for breakfast?" And he's like, "I had some kind of eggs or something." Like in this one, he sounded really, really low. When I'm saying not low in volume, like low, like he's like, "Yeah." And he said something fairly normal. And then he says this thing, and I quoted. He said, "It's so weird talking to you." And then Kathy says, "What?" He said, "So it's kind of weird talking to you." And Kathy says, she says, "Why would it be weird?" And he says, "I don't know. It just is. Everything's weird in here anymore." And then she says, "Yeah, I know." He's like, it's like I feel like I've lost." And then Kathy says something weird, like I didn't catch it. He's like, and then Rick's like, "My mind gone to hell or something." And then Kathy's like, "Well, you're kind of living in it right now, or living it, or living in it." right now, and
Okay.
it's not a good place to be in. And she says, I don't know how much I can't even, like, I couldn't make it out what she said, so like the sentence doesn't really make sense. It says
Well,
it's something to the effect of like, I don't know how much saying anything. Like, so I didn't get it. He's like, but then so this is where he says, but you know that I done it, right? And she says, like immediately, she's like, I don't want to talk about that, okay? I want to have a good conversation between us. I just don't. And then she's like, I guess it doesn't matter what I think. She's like, of course it does. It's just really a really frustrating spot right now. And she says, what? He said, I'm just in a really frustrating spot right now. And he says, he says, I know that it's nothing compared to where you're at. She's like, no. He's like, I'm not trying to. She says, no. Says, your side is a lot worse than mine, and I have freedoms that you don't have. So we're not going to go there. And I feel guilty about that. And then he says this thing, which I don't know why nobody will talk to me and be honest with me. And then Kathy says that you're not going to get that there. They've already got their mindset. They don't care you didn't do it. She's like, that's just what prison's like. You're just a number. And then he says it again. He says, I don't feel like anybody's willing to be honest with me anymore. He's like, and then he says, like, everybody's afraid to hurt my feelings or something. And then Kathy's like, I just think people have to be very careful when they talk. I mean, we all do. And Rick's like, yeah. And then she said, I could get a chaplain, or if I could get a chaplain to pray with you, would that be okay? She says that like she's trying to get a hold of somebody. She can't get anybody to answer the phone. And then Rick says, I had a chaplain. He said he prayed with me once, but it just doesn't seem to help me any. And then Kathy's like, well, praying to yourself is helpful anyway. And she said it helped me. And then she tries to give him some support. She says, I know there's plenty of people out there praying for you. She said, you just have to pray your bad thoughts away and know that the demons are fighting hard to get you. He says, I know. He's like, I feel like they already got me. I'm already in hell. She said, no. Well, you're kind of in a physical hell right now, but your soul doesn't need to be. So I hope you understand that. She's like, I'm sorry I ever, and then can't understand what Kathy says. And then he's like, I questioned the Bible that you got me about asking if, and then he was like, he got another one. He brought up the Bible thing like a few times. Like, I don't know. Did we talk about the Bible thing? I could have sworn that I was like hearing. I haven't read it in my notes yet, unless it's the last call where he was like, I couldn't tell if the Bible that you got me was real.
Well, you're reading it right now. You just said those words.
Oh no, but he said because it said something about like the messenger, and I'm not seeing that in my notes. It says the Holy Bible, and it says basically the same thing, and then it like so he was like, I guess she sent him another Bible.
Right.
Because I think he was tearing his one Bible up and throwing it in the toilet.
Right.
So that's it. That disconnects. The call disconnects. And so then we get to I think, how many have we done? Is that 6?
I don't know. You're in June, so
Yeah. So I
I
think
think
so this is the last one. This is from June 11th of 2023. Again, no time. And now this one, he sounded different to me, if I remember. Like this one, his voice sounded like a little more normal.
so not to get you totally off track, but Sleuths Investigates, thank you very much, Sleuth. Did he sound like Bridge Guy, Bob? You know people are dying to know.
I don't think so at all. But you can't really tell. It's like I would have to have he just doesn't
Listen,
sound like Bridge Guy, you know?
and
I
his
mean,
Bridge Guy's voice, I think, is totally altered, so I don't even know that Bridge Guy sounds like Bridge Guy.
guys down the hill, guys down the hill. It's like,
Well, we know that the guys in the down the hill weren't the same sentence, so you kinda just have to think about down the hill, because they took those from 2 different, you
did
know.
they?
Yeah, they said that he said guys, they said hi, and then he said down the hill. I don't know
Yeah,
why they're saying hi, you know what I mean? S
yeah. Um, yeah, I do know what you mean. I don't get the sense of it, but I think the bigger question that everybody should be asking is why didn't the state try to get some actual expert voice comparison? I mean,
'Cause they've got a
I don't
ton of
even
his
know
voice right there. They've got a ton of his voice.
a ton of his voice. They have a huge well, not only do they have that voice, they have the 3 hours of interviews. Like, the guy
Right,
came in and talked. Like, so they have him in all different they have him where he's being combative, where you know what I mean? Like, they have him, like, in every kind of phase that you could ever want.
right, for a voice analysis.
So, like, why they're done. Like, where's the voice analysis? Why didn't they get that done? Is it that they're afraid of the answer, potentially?
I mean,
I mean, you could say the same thing about the defense. Like, why didn't they go get a voice analysis? Like, this isn't like that might have had more to do with money. I don't know how much that kind of thing costs.
they've got 4,000,000, they've got plenty.
I'm talking about the defense.
Oh, it's not the defense's job, and yeah, like,
I know,
you
but
never wanna, God forbid, your person's like I don't know.
I don't know either. So, but this one he sounded different. I don't know exactly how to. I don't know how to quantify it really. He just
He's
sounded
starting
like
to sound more normal.
he sounded a bit more normal, a little bit. And this is June 11th, again, 2023. So the hellos, Kathy's like, he's like, hey, she's like, what's up? He's like, I did it. It's like the first thing he says, Kathy, she says, what? He said, I did it. Do you still love me? She said, yes, but you didn't do it. And then he says, why do you say that? And then she asks him, why do you say it? And then his answer is, I don't want to upset you. And then Kathy says, I'm already upset. He says, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I've lost my mind. And she says, you can't call me and talk to me like this, okay? You're killing me. He says, I'm so sorry. He says, I can't talk to you right now.
He
He's like,
said or she said?
she says, I can't talk to you right now. He's like, I didn't want to do this. I'm sorry. You're not going to do anything to yourself, are you? She
She
says,
said it,
no.
he said it.
He says it. Rick says, I didn't want to do this. I'm sorry. You're not good. So I want you to remember this because I heard the most odd thing at the end of this call. I think it was this call. He said, I didn't want to do this. I'm sorry. You're not going to do anything to yourself, are you? And she says, no, no. He says, probably going to have to kill myself now. She says, stop. You can't be calling me and talking like this. He says, you don't have anything to do with it. And Kathy's like, it doesn't matter. And he says, "Why are you so mad at me?" She said, "I'm not mad. I'm upset. I'm heartbroken." And then she said something else that I couldn't make out. He said, "I can't tell you what's been going through my mind. I feel like I'm already in hell with waiting on the Bible from you, but I don't understand what's going on." And she says, "Neither do I." He said, "I guess I'm going to have to stop calling. I'm sorry, okay?" She says, "You can't call me, hun." She says, "You can't call me, honey, if you're going to talk like that." And then he says, "I'm going to talk like what?" And then call mechanical voice says, "Thank you for using." So I like
That was 3 minutes or whatever, like, what the hell?
that one.
He maybe was out of
She,
money.
or she might like, cause she was in the middle of words when it disconnected, but like I didn't write the note that they got the 1 minute warning. So, and this is so on either this call or the next call, I think it's the one with his mom, where after his mom hangs up and before he gets off, you hear him say, "Okay," as if somebody was standing in the room monitoring that call that
Did
we're
they
about to
ask?
hear.
Oh, they've got no one to ask. They have to have had the video, but
I asked everybody, I'm like, "Oh my god, did you hear him say that?" Like he was checking to see if like was that okay? Like what I just did? Like
right.
okay. Like and I'm not this isn't me taking a position. I heard it and you guys out there tell me what else that could have been. Like who could he be? Because the call definitely disconnected with his mother. And he says, and it's like a second later before the system stops and you hear him say, "Okay." Not
Do
like,
other people hear it when you, like, turn to people, like, "Did you just
yeah,
hear that?"
yes, yeah. But when I went to Andrea and Lee, I'm like, "Did you guys hear that?" Andrea's like, "I didn't hear it." I'm like, "It was right at the very end." But everybody in my row had heard it. It had my mind like just running, and because I'd like when he had said the thing like a month ago about having somebody in the room next to him, and he's like, there's somebody with me right now. I mean, it's either a guard or Walla. It has to be, or he's hallucinating, right? All right. So at that point, we take the lunch. Um,
That's when you
and then,
called me about, like, "Oh my god, they're trying to get in this jail, recording."
so the last one,
Wait, but during the lunch, was that when you called me and said they were trying to get in this jail recording? Gotta tell the
oh
people
yeah,
about that.
yeah. So no, I don't think yes, I think it was because at that point, no, that wasn't until after Rosie was crossing Harshman. So that's when
Okay.
it comes up. So that didn't happen yet. So because it's like we take the lunch. Rosie starts like he comes in. The first thing they do is they play this last call, and then I think he asks a few questions. Like Nick McClellan asks some questions to Harshman, which I'll go through, and then it's Rosie on cross. And after Rosie's cross, this thing comes up that Rosie had asked, which really ended up. Well, I'll get to it. It
I
was
actually
interesting,
wish
and
Rosie would have asked him, "Y
it ate
you
up most.
don't know who he was talking to when he said, 'Okay'?" Like, it to point it out, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Um. So okay. All right. So we've got again this one. So this is going back in time. Remember, this was supposed to be played earlier in the morning. Nick had made a boo boo and had queued up the wrong audio. And this is with Rick and his mother on May 17th. Okay. So, and Rick's mom's name is Janice. Very sweet lady. And he says,
Wait, what's the date again? April?
so no, this is May 17th,
Okay.
2023. So these are all between April and June of 2023. And this is the same period of time that he's getting the Haldol, he's getting, he's going through the psychotic break. This is the time where, you know, Walla had testified that, she thought that he was feigning or malingering. And then when the last question that Rosie asked her is like, after you heard everything that was going on and you learned more about what was happening with him, she's like, you rethought your position about him feigning things, right? And she says, yes, I did. So this is him and Jan, and there was something really like, it was like, I'm not 100 on what he said because it was really, really hard to hear, and it was before the call. But you hear Rick talking to somebody else, and I think he said that that's my personal possessions. You have to, and then you can't hear anything else. You have to, and then that was it. And then his mom says hi, and
So he's
then
already talking to somebody beforehand too.
it sounded like it to me, where he's saying that's my personal possessions. So then, um, you've got Rick saying hello, and then it's like it seems like he's having a hard time hearing her, and then she says hello, and she says, "Are you there?" He says, "Yeah, I'm here." He's like, "How you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm all right, I guess." She says, "Yeah, it's good to hear you. Good to hear your voice." And so immediately says, "So did Kathy tell you that I did it?" And his mom says, "We're not going to discuss this, okay?" And then he goes silent, and she's like, "Are you there?" He says, "Yeah, I'm still there, or I'm still here." And she says, um, he says, and then Jan says, "We love you. You know that, don't you?" And he says, "Regardless." She says, "Yes." And then Rick asks, "Is Kathy okay?" And she says, "She's okay. We've been holding each other up." He said, "I'm just worried that you guys aren't going to love me because of the fact that I said I did it." So that, like, that what I put in quotes. He said, I'm worried that you guys aren't going to love me because of the fact that I said that I did it." So then his mom says, I just know you're not in a good place right now, and I'm praying for you. And we will always love you no matter what. Just saying it doesn't mean that you did it."
Mm,
And then he says, "Well, it does when I did." And then
mm.
she says, "Don't talk like this. I think they're messing with you. I think they're just messing with you." And then he says, "No, mom, they're not. I love you though."
How's his tone on this call? More normal?
No, this is in May. Like when he said that, "No, mom, they're not," like he had some inflection when he said that. Not much, but like it wasn't
But
just
something.
flat,
Right.
because I noted it. And he says, "So what are you doing?" He said, "I love you too. I just know that you don't have it in you to do something like that." And then he says, "Mom, I wouldn't sit here and tell you I did if I didn't."
Mm.
So she says, "Well, if they're messing with your meds and all that, yeah, you would, but we're not going to discuss the case anymore." So then he says, "So if I did do it, then you guys don't love me anymore?"
Mm.
And then she says, "I'll always love you no matter what." And she says, "You can count on that." And he says, okay. And she says, there's nothing that would ever make me stop loving you. And he says, that's good to know. And then she says, are they letting you call again? So it got like obviously there's been a gap in time from the calls. He says, well, right now I am.
Mm.
Then she says, have you gotten any of my letters? And he says, I'm not really getting mail anymore again. She says,
Mm.
I write you every day.
Wow.
He said, great. He said, there's something else to share with my therapist. And he says, oh, she says, they're letting you talk to her again. And then he says, they've always been letting me talk to her. And she says, oh, just once a month or on a regular basis. And he says, no, she's coming and seeing me every day. And she says, well, that's good to hear. And he says, all right, well, I'll let you go. And she says, I love you. And he says, tell everybody else I love them. And then that's it.
And then, okay.
Uh, and then at the end of that, when she hangs up, I hear him say, okay, just like that, just like that. Like as if somebody was like standing over him, listening to him say it. And then he was like, was that good enough? That type of shit. But, you know, it's like, how do we have a situation where somebody hasn't gone and looked at the goddamn videos?
I mean, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they have.
I mean, or they have, and then there's
You can't see what's on the other end.
can't see what's on the other end, or I mean, if somebody's gonna be in that cell, I get the impression that you can see.
Yeah, but what if they're right outside the cell doors?
Right. Or they're in that slit, like the where they put the food. So, all right, at that point, we have McClellan, and then so he goes through this whole thing. So, over the course of all these hours and hours and hours of listening to Rick, have you gotten a sense of his demeanor, of his tone, of his speech patterns? And then Rosie's like, all right, objection. Can I ask a preliminary question? Is he says, is it accurate to say that you don't have a specific education in speech patterns or psychology? And he's like, no, I don't. And he sustains it. So she's going to let this cop, get on the
You mean
stand.
overrules it?
Yeah, you're right. She overrules it, and she says, so he says, so she overrules it, and he says, okay, so how would you describe his demeanor? And he says, calm, subdued, and solemn, and consistent. He's making admissions. He sounds the same. He's got the same sound, the same tone, the same pattern. So that's accurate that he's like flat the whole way. So he basically says the same thing. He says, and then he says, then he talks to him about um this is where the thing comes up. He says, and I want to turn your attention to this is where the recap of the Walla thing comes up. He's like, I'm going to show you a document from August of 2024. He says, do you recognize that as a report from Dr. Walla? And he says,
Was
yeah.
there an objection at least?
Well, not at that point, but as soon as like they figure out what it is, there was an objection.
Okay.
And then he says it was, but it wasn't like cumulative, which is what it should have been. It's like, why are you going through this shit again?
Best evidence rule, cumulative,
Right.
hearsay, lack of personal knowledge,
All of it. So she was,
foundation.
he
Well,
says, and she was, yeah, exactly. She was examining Richard Allen. Uh, and then he goes through the statement again. He goes through the entire statement. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what is going on? So I'm like trying to remember. And he says, and he had made statements as to what he was doing on the day of the crime. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, so what did he say? And he goes through the whole thing. He was, he's with his parents in the morning, and then he was
Not another objection, like, just this one objection?
no, the one objection. It's like like not a continue. Like you and I would be like continuing objection. Like this is insane that you're
Right,
allowing
but
this
it's
to
probably
happen.
better that they're not, like, let them just, say
Right,
the same damn
right,
thing again, so we're not all that worried about it.
right. Because that's always an approach that we take. It's like they've heard enough of them getting denied. That their objections are overruled, and the states are getting sustained consistently. And like that's not to say she sprinkles a few sustained in with defense objections, but if you were to keep account, like that's one of the things I should have done. I should have done a objection, sustained, and overruled count for both
Right.
sides, just so we could see it. I wish I would have thought about that. Like that would have been something that you would have thought of. Be like, hey, you know what you should do? Keep account,
But
just
I
so we have an
didn't.
idea.
And how are you gonna do that and keep your,
It's hard. It would have been
notes?
hard.
Yeah.
So he goes through the whole thing again. Supposed to, but there's a method to their madness, because this is where the van thing comes into play. Because they didn't really make much of a deal out of it yesterday until they put Brad Weber on, the van guy. So it's like, okay, so he's supposed to be with his parents. He's supposed to go to lunch. His sister comes over. He doesn't want to go to lunch. He buys a 6-pack. Uh, he drinks half of it in the beginning, and then he drinks the other 3 later.
I don't understand how he had so much more details than what
I
she
don't
what
know, like, maybe that was the reason they put it in, because I definitely do not recall the lying in wait thing from when Walla was doing it. Oh, Nookie. So, it says he's bundled up.
Hey.
It says he goes out to the trails. He's lying in wait. He sees the girls. He follows them, onto the bridge. And this is where, like, and this is like, I was kind of like happy that they said it again, because it's like when I was trying to take that down so quickly, I had missed a couple things that I had put in the margins that I remembered that he said when I'm trying to write, because I'm at a disadvantage because I'm not a fast writer, because I'm trying to write neatly. It's like if I'm going to write fast, it's going to be sloppy. If I write slow, like I'm not keeping up in real time, so I'm having to like go back and fill in gaps. So so he says he was doing something with the gun, and that's when the bullet falls out. And he says the thing that they thought they were older, but they don't. This time he doesn't give the ranges. He doesn't say he thought that they were 18 or 19, or they could have been as young as 11. So that he thought they were older. He says he orders the girls down the hill, that he was going to sexually abuse them, that a van drove up and scared him. And then that's when he cut their throats, put some branches on them. He kept off the trails, which I didn't remember hearing the first time, so as not to be seen. Then he was, and this one I caught it on this one, that he went to his car that was parked by an old building, and then that's where they stopped it. So there were a couple of different things that I can't be
Parked
sure.
by an old building, not where an old building was.
Right, he said he was parked by an old building. That's what it said. So then he starts he starts questioning Harshman about Brad Weber. And he said, and he hands him some pictures, and he's like, have you, like, what are these pictures? He's like, it's a picture of a van. And he's like, do you know who Brad Weber is? And then he says that, yeah, he's a guy that lives over at 625 West.
What the fuck is the foundation for this?
Dude,
The
it's like
guy that works at the jail? Was it guy or is this an investigator?
this is an ISP guy, state police. He's the master trooper. He says he picked out the van. And he says, you know who Brad Weber is? And he says, yeah, who he is? He's a guy, and he owned a vehicle, right? And like, so Rosie had made a successful objection as to hearsay because, like, this guy was trying to say what Brad Weber told him. So Nick was trying to use him to get Brad Weber's testimony that was so screwed up yesterday in today. And Brad made the objection twice that it's hearsay. He can't testify. He's like he can't testify to what this guy said.
No.
He's like, what is this? Am I in crazy world? So like
Right.
McClellan sits there and thinks for a minute. He's like, oh, so he's like, and you're aware of who Brad Weber is? Yeah. He's like, and he owned a van, right? And are you're familiar through your investigation what type of van he had? It's like, yeah, it was a 2000 Econoline van. And then he asked him, so what did you do after you got that information? He's like, well, he's like, then I looked at Brad Weber's work history. So he's saying the same exact shit. So they're doing this, like, this is how Nick's hoping to end the state's case in chief by putting in what they consider to be the most powerful confession, where he gives the detail about a van, which the state is going to argue in closing that was not in discovery, that Rick Allen had no way of knowing about this van other than if he's the guy who saw the van. Right. So says, oh, well, Brad Weber's work history. Yeah, I saw it. And he says that, well, what time do you recall what time he got off work? He says, well, he said, yeah, I remember what time he got on and what time he got off. He started at 5:37 a.m. He got off at 2:02 p.m. And then,
No cumulative.
and then he says, okay, and did you read the interview with Brad Weber and Mullen? And then Rosie makes another objection. And he says, hearsay. And then he says, I have a preliminary question. He's like, did you confirm his work history? Brad asks that. He's like, did you confirm that he owned the van? And he says, no. He says he didn't confirm his work history, that wasn't his thing. Like he wasn't the one who talked to him. He's like, you viewed the records. He's like, you viewed the reports. He's like, were any of the reports, are you aware of any of the reports regarding a van being posted on social media? And he's like, I'm not aware of that. He's like, would it surprise you to know that they were, like, early on in the investigation? And he's like, I was not aware of that. And he says,
I wonder if jurors were writing. That's where I would have looked immediately.
yeah,
when he said
they
that.
were jotting that down.
I
They
was
were
like,
jotting that down.
thank God. Thank God.
So then it's like on he said, and after that, you actually interviewed Brad Weber. He says, is this your report? He says, yeah. He says, does it accurately reflect? And he's like, yeah. He's like, but I can't remember it. So he goes and refreshes his recollection. He's like, okay, so after you did your interview with Brad Weber, did you look at the analysis of Libby German's phone? And he says, yeah. And that was done by Chris Cecil. He's like, yeah. And he's like, on that, he's like, did you view the video? He's like, yeah. Did you watch the original? Yes. Did you watch the enhanced? Yes. And we're talking about the
Wait a
high
second.
bridge video,
Oh, okay.
Libby's video.
Right.
So he says, he's like, yeah. He's like, I watched both. I watched the enhanced one and then the extra enhanced with the stabilizing. And he's like, did you use that to develop a timeline? He's like, yes, he did. And like, so this is where they're trying to build. This is their entire case right now. The van has become their case.
It was an
Their
hour and
entire
a half
case.
afterwards. An hour and a half. You don't get scared and then keep going for an hour and a half.
Right. Well, in their timeline, Alan's gone immediately.
No, at 3:57 when Sarah Carball sees him. 3:57.
That's what I'm trying to say. They've backed themselves in a corner with this timeline because in their timeline, Weber's pulling up at like 2:32, 2:33. Like he's the van he sees. And that's
I
when
need you to
that's
pull
when
out
the
your
homicide
opening
takes place.
notes, because in your opening notes, the defense said,
Yes.
remember, they
I
said at
think they discovered this
3:57.
van. I think they put this van thing together during the trial. Like Brad Weber was a late ad. He was like everyone was surprised when Brad Weber took the stand yesterday. Like I'm telling you, they switched theories in the middle of the trial
Well, that's what the
unequivocally.
defense said the
They
defense
didn't
said they were
mention
going
anything about a van and openings. They didn't mention anything about like Richard Allen mentioning a van and that we're gonna put on the witness the only van that he could have seen. It wasn't in the discovery. None of that was mentioned in openings. None of it. What I'm telling you is they switched streams
but
of
that's what
their
the defense
theory.
told the jury they're going to have to do.
Wait,
Mid-trial, they're going to have to change their theory. So hold them to what they said, remember what they said, because there is no way we're gonna get through this trial and they're still going to say that.
right. And they did it. And they did it. And the other theme was wait. Just wait. You're gonna hear their thing, but I'm asking you, I'm begging you, just wait.
Now they shouldn't even call Sarah Carball back because the state just changed the timeline,
Right. So
unless
it's
they
like
wanna say it is him.
right. So at that point, they put the video up and it's the enhanced one. So he's like, all right, so you use this to let's start with the guys down the hill. He's like, so the video was taken at 2:13 p.m., right? And he's like, from the metadata on Libby's phone, that phone stopped moving and never moved again, is what he says. At what time? So we got the 2:13 video. He says the phone stopped moving at 2 p.m., 2:32 p.m. and 39 seconds. Okay. So this is their timeline now. So when the phone stops moving forever, that has now become the state's theory as to exactly when the girls were killed.
Did they say that?
It has to be that. It's got to be that. It can't be anything else. They have now tied their entire case to the van. Their entire case is Richard Allen saw a van, it scared the shit out of him, and he killed the girls right then and there. That's it. This is now their theory of the case.
But they've been saying this from the beginning. In opening, I know that you weren't on the live, and you haven't been on the live when I've repeated it like 7 times. The after their mini opening with jury questions and then their actual opening, they kept going with this theory of he was about to essay the girls, he was interrupted, and then he decided to unalive them. And I said to everyone after both of those, I said, "All right, stand by because it's clear they're going to be coming out with something. They're putting in some kind of evidence of this interruption." So they already planned for that to be the interruption. So I just don't get why they would. Yeah, that's why when everyone's like a van interrupted, I'm like, okay, that's an hour and a half before that they said they left. So they were using the interruption and um and the um and the 3:57 time, I don't know, all along, but
I hear what you're saying, but none of that matters. Opening is an evidence. This is their evidence, and this is their timeline now. Like this is like when they say the phone stopped moving and never moved again, and
there's
they're
not
they're
enough time for all that. The
and
clothes
they're
were
lining it
changed. They
up.
went through the creek. The clothes were changed. People were moved. Positions were changed. That's not enough time anyway.
Right. So you're preaching to the choir, girl.
All right.
Like I think that they've painted themselves into a corner that destroyed their case. So so then he asked him how long did it take Brad Weber to get from his home or from his work at Subaru.
Objection, hearsay,
That objection was made,
and
uh, overruled.
oh my god.
Yep. So how long did it take Brad Weber? So he says
She sustained it in one breath and then overruled it in the next? At some point, she agreed it was hearsay, didn't she?
she did up top, but this is like less Brad Weber speaking, and it's still hearsay because it's the Google Maps. He's
Oh,
like, I Google mapped it.
I'll be back.
So how long? So you Google mapped it. How long did it take? What did Google Maps show in terms of how long it took to get from Subaru to his access road, his private access road? And he says, I'm saying anywhere from 27 to 30 minutes. And so that puts him, and he gets off at 2:02. So that's got him rolling in their mind at 2:32 p.m., which is like in their minds, it lines up with the exact time that Libby's phone stops moving once and for all. And then and so this is actually the part that was just insane. So Nick ends the thing. And so Nick says, "Oh, so you have listened to hundreds of thousands of hours of Richard Allen speaking, right? And how many times have you watched that video?"
Bridge guy.
I don't know, like hundreds of times. He's like, "Do you recognize the voice on that video?"
Objection, the voice has been altered, literally altered.
And he says, "Yes, I recognize the voice of Richard Allen."
Was
No,
there an objection?
yeah, but I mean, he's not like, how in the world could he do that?
But
Yes, there was an objection. She's just overruling the
but
objection.
no sidebar? Was there a sidebar? That
There was
is
not
audio that was literally
there was not a sidebar.
edited.
And I gotta be on Vinny in 20 minutes. Do you want me to send you the rest of the notes?
Yeah, so I
I
can
mean,
answer people's
there's
questions.
not a ton left. Because like what ends up happening, so Rosie starts his cross, and he says that so law enforcement received over 14,000 tips, isn't that correct? And that in many of those tips, there were people that recognized that voice, correct? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, well, you were part of the investigation team. He's like, I came on later. So he says, well, Brad Weber, he owns a white van, right? He said, would you be surprised if there were hundreds of white vans that are referred to in the discovery? He's like, I don't know. I didn't look at the discovery like that. He's like, well, would it surprise you? Would it surprise you to know that there were hundreds of white vans or vans that were referenced in the discovery? He's like, I don't know.
And
He's
he
like,
got his discovery before these confessions started.
right. And he said, would you, he's like, you believe that what Brad Weber told you that day is truthful, right? And he says, yes. And he said, and if it turned out that information that he gave you is not accurate, would that destroy your theory of this case? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, no. He's like, I believe what he said. So he says that, and then he gives this weird answer. He's like, and I'm not relying only on Brad Weber. He says there's an eyewitness account that Richard Allen is on that bridge, and that's what I relied on.
Did he ask him whose?
He didn't.
Ugh.
I mean, it was such a ridiculous statement anyway. Like it was. So he's like, he's like, so you reviewed several reports regarding Brad Weber, right? And you reviewed the reports of I think the guy's name is Goatee or something to that nature, and Poole, who we think are feds. I think they're the feds. I think
Okay.
these are the feds that had ultimately interviewed Weber, and this Weber report is the one where he's driving around fixing his ATMs after he gets off work that day. Or so he says, he said, did any of those reports contradict what Brad Weber told you? He says, well, he's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know if I read those reports. He's like, well, it's like, if those reports contradicted what Brad Weber told you, would that change your opinion? He says, no. And that's like, I think he repeats, or he says the eyewitness thing again. And he's like, well, Brad Weber's not a credible human being. He's like, right, correct. He's like, He's like, no, I think he's credible. And he said, for this timeline to work, he's like, you absolutely need that van to be there at that time, don't you? And he says, yes. And then he says, and then Brad gets some shit in. He's like, and you heard, he says, and you heard that they seized a gun from Brad Weber, correct? And McClellan stands up, objecting. Objection. He's like, this is going against the motion in limine. And Brad
What?
gets it in. Yeah, he's like, because Brad Weber's one of the guys you can't bring up. And he says, and at one point, Brad Weber was a suspect, correct? And McClellan's objecting furiously, and Brad's getting this shit in. It was
And the judge was overruling it?
No, she sustained it. Like I thought, and then they had a sidebar.
I thought he was gonna get.
I thought
like, I'm gonna hold you in contempt.
Right, like that didn't happen. Like he got it in. And then so after they had the sidebar, they come back and he says, did you ever consider that Brad Weber might be involved in this case? And Harshman says no. And then he says, was the Brad Weber interview recorded? And he says, yes. He says, was yesterday the first time that you ever looked at the report from Poole and Viku, who I think is the other one, the Weber report? And he says, yes. And that's the one about the ATM shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he said, well, do you think that it's accurate that any psychologist that is going to testify is going to have a better handle on RA's, on Richard Allen's mental state than you will? He's like, well, maybe not any psychologist. He's like, did you know that, he's like, did you understand, or were you aware that Richard Allen had Halidol injections? He's like, I did not. I was not aware of that. He's like, did you know that do you know if Richard Allen was on any mind altering drugs? He says, no, I didn't know that. And they said, and you all put together a team to monitor Richard Allen's communications, right? And he says, well, yeah, there was a bunch of people put on it, but I was really the one to, I was spearheading it. He's like, and you were assigned to basically monitor the following: the incel videos, the texting, ingoing and outgoing from the tablet, the phone calls, all of it. He's like, yeah. He's like, I was. And he's like, did you ever review Richard Allen's medical records? He's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I don't know, like the overall, no. He's like, I looked at the door sheets, which were from the guards. And he's like, and you looked at the behavior reports, right? The ones that Waller wrote up. And he's like, yeah, but you didn't look at any of his other medical history. So you have no idea anything about what Richard Allen has going on in his mind. Is that what you're telling me? So you're making these grandiose claims on the stand of what this guy's mental state is, but you don't know anything about how he was being treated medically in that facility. And he says, yeah, I don't know. And then he says, he's like, you went so far as that you were actually getting, he's like, your surveillance of an incarcerated pretrial detainee went so far as that you were getting automated messages from a third party on your phone whenever Richard Allen made a phone call from his cell, right? He's like, well, he's like, yeah. He's like, texts, maybe, definitely phone calls. I would get something would pop up on his cell, like Richard Allen made a call. He's like, did you ever review the videos of Richard Allen and his condition, what was going on in his cell, like ever? He's like, no, I don't think so. Like, not like I wasn't sitting around watching it. I was pretty busy listening to him. He's like, well, do you think that might have been helpful to see the video to add context to these video calls?
So Brad Weber is not specifically named on the list, but third-party culprits generally.
Right.
Right.
So he said, which is insane. So then he asks, in the history of your entire career, have you ever been assigned to surveil a pre-trial detainee like this? And he says, no.
I'm surprised they didn't object to relevance.
So he said that Mr. Allen in the video, No, he says, so Mr. Allen, in that statement, you claim that he says he's lying in wait. Um, but he's on the bridge though, right? Like, how does that work? He's like, well, maybe the girl, maybe he was lying in wait and the girls passed him and they came out and followed him onto the bridge. Because Brad had said, so the girls made it to the south side of the bridge. So how was he lying in wait? And he was following them, this bridge guy, right? So he's like, and then he says the thing that, he could have been waiting, like hiding, deeking in the woods. And then when they walk past, then at that point, then they get, he gets behind them. So he says the gun was cycled. So he says that the gun was cycled and that's where the bullet would have been ejected, right? He says, well, yeah. He's like, and like, he's like, there, these railroad ties. He's like, there's big gaps in between them and there's some missing, right? He's like, did you ever find a round anywhere on the tracks or in the river? He's like, no, not that I'm aware of. He's like, but the story is that he did something to the gun there and that's when the bullet fell out, right? I mean, that's what he said. That's what his statement is. He's like, yeah.
That didn't
So
happen.
he said, in all the times you were listening to Richard Allen, it's like you heard him profess his innocence many, many times, right? He's like, yeah. He's like, well, did you turn those over to the state? Give that to the prosecutor? He's like, that wasn't, he's like, no, I didn't. He's like, did you ever go visit his cell in Westville to see what his conditions were that he was living in were? It's like, no. He says, did you ever see him eating his own feces? Did you ever see him rolling around in his own feces? He's like, maybe allegedly he was doing this. Like he starts acting like, he's like, it's on video. He's like, but yeah, it's like a grainy video. So like now you're getting this cop who's giving resistance to things that are clearly videotaped, that clearly exist. Like when officers start to do that on the stand, they just lose credibility in the eyes of the jury. It's like the jury, from what I gather, is going to be seeing these videos. Now, when they hearken back to Harshman's testimony, do you think that they're going to find him to be credible when he's, instead of just saying, no, I didn't see it, or I saw it, but I I didn't
Or
think it
just
was,
yes.
or yeah, I saw it, anything, like it just acknowledge it. Like why try to walk that back as if you didn't see it to try to make Rick Allen seem less crazy than he was? So he says, were you aware that he was diagnosed as psychotic? And he says, I was not aware of that diagnosis. He says, did you ever talk to anyone who treated Richard Allen? He says, no. And didn't you actually say in a deposition that I had with you that Richard Allen is exactly where he needs to be? So then they had a little, oh no, shit. I gotta go.
Well, send me your notes.
Okay. All right.
While you're doing that, I'll answer some questions. And
Okay. I'll send
can
them.
their closing argument be vastly different from the opening? Is that allowed? Well, yes, it is allowed, but every lawyer knows, and even we've seen situations where I think it was in the Boone trial where the judge is like, all right, if you want to say that in your opening, do it at your own risk, because like the defense did in this case, where they said, remember what the state has told you in their opening, what they're telling you the evidence is going to show, because they're going to have to change their story. That's the risk. You can't promise something in opening, because in closing, when you don't come through, the other side's going to say, they promised you this, they promised you this, they promised you this, and it didn't happen. Thank you, Kate. It sounds like he did have 24 access to make calls when when he had a tablet and when that tablet was functioning. So we've already heard periods of time where he didn't have a tablet, and we've heard periods of times where he was not allowed to make calls and his family's asking, so they're allowing you to make calls again. Um, Indigo Montoya wants to know, does this strike you as the type of sophisticated killer that stopped to swipe down every bullet, put gloves on, and then reload his weapon? Then he doesn't mention it to anyone. I clearly a rhetorical question because obviously no. Then appreciate your comment, Indigo. All right, let me see what Bob sent me here. All right, well, I got nothing. Oh, he's probably taking pictures because I only had his earlier notes. So I'll just keep plugging along with these questions here. Allie, watch your live with tell Bob about the marks on Libby's neck and if they might resemble a rune symbol. Yep. Bob's already gone. Lisa emailed notes probably to Bob and it sounds like no, they did not show the guards watching his calls. Thanks, Jason. Alan's flaw is he loves his wife too much. Indiana has bad closure rates for homicides. Flora 4, Burger Chief, Chef, the I-70 killer, etc. They want a conviction more than anything. Thanks, Sabrina. Bob, those calls to his wife, at least what we, the public, have seen. So heartbreaking. I've had various family members experience delirium in hospital setting. Can't imagine in a flicking prison. Big crimes investigated. You can't explain away Kathy Allen saying to Richard, "You didn't tell me you were on the bridge." Okay, no, what Kathy said was, "I you didn't tell me you went out on the bridge." He says, "Yes, I did." And she said, "Well, I didn't remember, and now I said the wrong thing." So she was worried about seeming like she lied because she didn't remember him telling her he went out on the bridge, but clearly she knew he went to the bridge, he walked the trails. She just didn't recall that he had literally went out, and we don't know if that ever came up. Like, did you actually go to the first terrace, like, or trestle, whatever they call it? I don't see that as anything, and it was pretty clear that she just didn't remember and then was worried that she is gonna seem like she lied to the police. For those in the chat are already convinced Richard Allen is guilty, apparently you don't believe in our Constitution or our judicial system. The trial isn't over and the state has not met their burden. Sniper 79Y2, I'd agree. I think we have talked about the van. People were asking about that before. Jill and Wendy. Jill and Wendy, I'm assuming we have since answered your questions on that, but if you've got anything else, let me know. Thank you, Sonny. Had family with me. I had family with me, all problems. This is deaf mental. Oh my God, this poor man has been through. Thank you for your diligent, honest assessment. So sad. Wild Light Arts. Is he actually paranoid or is he drugged and targeted? I wouldn't be surprised if someone put hallucinogens in his water based on the way he handled the psychologically tortured. Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Wendy DB, thank you. Why didn't the state bring on their prescribing doctor from prison? Yes, the defense can call him. I'm assuming that they will. The defense's case in chief will be able to explain the confessions the jury heard. They can try, will not be able to explain. Uh, Even a respected Indiana defense attorney said Richard is screwed before the case started. He has experience. Um, I don't know. To me personally, I do think that they sort of explain themselves. I think it sounds clear that he's, trying to. Um, I think it's a reasonable interpretation. Anyway, one possible reasonable interpretation calls them into doubt. That being, he's trying to distance himself. He's trying to let go of his wife, trying to get his wife to let him go, trying to get back his ability to make phone calls as long as he's saying what they want him to say, those kind of things. Um, Sandy wants to know, Bob, did he know about the van through discovery or not? I feel like he's innocent unless he knew about the van. So they I think this question's been answered as well, that the van was there was vans all through the discovery, and again, to me, I'm just at a loss at why everyone thinks this van is such a big deal when it was an hour and a half later. But yeah, the van was out on social media, it was known to people in the community, it was all over Discovery. Um, Bunch of different vans. So, Alec, Trev, thank you. Hey, Bob and Allie, one thing that has puzzled me, if you go by the state's theory, is how Alan was supposed to have slashed Libby 3 to 4 times while Abby just stands there 10 to 15 feet away and never takes off running, just waits. I 100%, a billion percent agree. Because if every other theory is one girl's not going to leave her friend. He's got a gun on them. Once your friend is unalived in front of you, the killer clearly doesn't have a firearm in his hand. You're going to run. So that one person with that, Alex or Alec's point is very, very well taken. Let's see if I got anything from Bob. Let's keep going with you guys. Okay, he did. He sent me his and, um, the other, I guess that listener who was saying, um, "Did you get my notes?" Whose I'm gonna open up and see how they look because, um oh, no, another observers. Okay. Alright. So he said the stuff about, like, did you ever go to his cell? Um, did you ever go look at any of the videos? Did you ever see him eating his feces? We got through that. Did you talk to anyone who treated him? You actually said Richard Allen, right, okay. So, we've got alright, so then we get a jury question. Alright, so sorry, guys, I'm trying to compare these 2 and make sure, um, they jive, but he talks about the November 22 phone call, um, having, relevance to the case, um, because of his mental state. Um, did you find what he said was significant? Quote, "If this becomes too much for you, um, I'll say whatever it is they want me to say." And those words suggest that he was attempting to do whatever he needed to do to take the heat off of his wife. And then I'm assuming that he probably said no. And they talk about April 3rd question. Rick referred to a phone call made early in the day to his father. I don't know offhand. You know that he made a phone call that day at 3:12 a.m. Yes. You reviewed it. No, I mean, I heard it in real time, but I didn't review it for these proceedings. 3 calls were made the morning of April 3rd. Yes. Would the 2 other calls provide the same content to the other phone calls? Objection. Did Rick Allen proclaim his innocence in the 312 phone call? Wait a second. Let me find the other notes because Bob doesn't put yes or no. Um, hmm, April 3rd phone call. Jesus. Neither of them wrote the answer. Neither of them wrote the answer. Um, so what Bob says, did Rick Allen proclaim his innocence in the 312 phone call? I'm assuming the answer is yes. Did Rick Allen say it was like Guantanamo Bay? I'm assuming the answer was yes, because we know that's what oh no, I'm sorry. Objection, objection. So I'm going to assume that they were sustained. Um, and I wish I could ask um, what objection, what they argued. Um, did he know that Rick Allen was displaying bizarre behavior in April, May, and June when the phone calls? And answer yes. Otherwise, they're generic confessions. What is your definition of generic? Well, if your definition of generic is I did it, um, and all of those messages and phone calls, that's all that he says. And then McClellan asks for leave to play uh, the other videos that he wanted to play, and I think that's where the hmm. And then on redirect, they were like, "Is it normal for inmate calls to be" I'm assuming this says recorded, and the answer is probably yes. "Do they listen to the calls?" Sometimes was the answer. Rosie acted about Richard Allen being a model. Okay, that was about trying to get that model inmate, um model inmate video. They were trying to get this other video in that where Richard Allen was yelling at the guards, um, but the judge didn't let it in. Do you monitor all the other, people on occasion? Attorney calls, are they monitored? Assuming the answer was no. Are the cameras in the cell? I'm assuming the answer is yes. Okay, jury questions. And Bob isn't here to say it's your favorite time, it's my favorite time. So, in your experience, you say that people held in cu often held in custody and jail or prisons. Oh, in your experience, would you say that people are most often held in jail or prisons? And he said they're held in jails. Did you listen to Richard Allen's phone conversations before May 22nd and hear his confession? May 22nd. Jury question. Let me just compare the other one. All right. Jury question. Looks like it was on the back side of this page and that I didn't get the back side. Sorry, guys. I keep getting this tickle in my throat. All right. So I don't know what the answer was to that question. Did you listen to RA's phone conversations before May 22nd and hear his confessions? Then McClellan said, you heard Alan's confessions before May, and they said April 3rd. But the first recorded phone, was April 3rd. Okay. Do you know how many vans? Okay, so then they brought this back up. Down, how many vans turned down Brad Weber's drive? I don't know. Are there any other properties down there? No. Is there a gate? No. I don't know how they got all this in off of, unless that was so that must have been the next jury question. Do you know how many vans turned down Brad Weber's drive? I don't know. Then McClellan follows up. Are there any other private drives down there? No. Is there a gate? No. And then Rosie. The gate's not always closed. Well, I don't know, because the other said, is there a gate? No. And then Rosie asks, the gate's not always closed sometimes. Do you know how many vans travel down the road to his property? No, I don't. The Google search history is published. I wish he was here to tell me about that. Oh my God, the defense called a witness already? I didn't know this. Did you guys know this? My Lord. All right. So did everybody else know? I had assumed it closed, that like it ended and they didn't call a witness. All right. Well, they did, and it's coming. It's coming at us. And I don't know what this Google search history is, because I thought they were keeping that out, but apparently they let it in. All right. Cheyenne Mill. I don't know. She lives in Windermere. In February 13th of 2017, she lived with her parents in wait. In Monticello. And her best friend, God, guys. She woke up that morning, her and her best friend went hiking down at the park east of Delphi, 15 minutes. It says, I asked her if she had been to the High Bridge. Showed up at the High Bridge at 2:50. Parked in the grass. And then it's a correction, the trails. Oh, by Mears entrance. This says like Mears something else. I don't know. There were 2 cars there. She got a phone call at 3:12 from BF. I know everybody else knows who all these initials are. BF. I reported that I was at the trail that day. I got out of my car. Shelley Duncan and I passed one man, overweight. He did not respond to us. Saw a man and a woman. Started down the trail to the High Bridge. Shelley Hicks saw Shelley Hicks and her boyfriend. Maybe that's what the BF stands for. They were sitting out on the platform. She went all the way across the bridge. Crossed the bridge. Looked a while. It was dangerous. There was missing wood. When we got across, we had to go to the bathroom. We went off the trail and peed. They took a photo snapshot at 12:49. At 13:49. What? That's only 1:49. I thought she said she got there 2:50. This says 2:50. Let me see what the other note says. Yeah, it also says 2:50. Unsure of time, but 2:50 at the trail for the High Bridge. She parked in the grass by the parking lot for the trailhead. Connected trail, Mears connector. 2:13, she received a phone call. Now, it says confused whether it's 2:13 or 3:13. Judge concerns reading testimony from notes. Phone call 3:12, already on trail. All right, Bob just says he sent me someone else's notes. No. Except he didn't. All right. Left for the High Bridge, right for the connector. Passed one man. When she came to the bridge, it was a man and a woman. Overweight, said hi, no response. Continued towards the High Bridge. First platform, Shelley Hicks and her boyfriend kept walking. They went all the way across the bridge, taking time. Had to pick up son. Took a while to get way across the bridge. Just stepped off the bridge and went to the bathroom. Got back on. Took photos on the bridge on the way back. All right. This photo was at 3:49. Okay, not 1:49. She had made it to the end of the bridge and turned back. Then they showed an enlarged photo, was the same. They showed a photo with the water under the bridge. They showed Shelby something in a Snapchat. There was another picture of the water at 3:53. They had a sixth picture of Shelby with her feet hanging over the platform at 3:55. Admitted without objection. 2 pictures of water. No clothing or blood in the water at this time frame. First page, photo from Snap, comment, screenshot from Facebook, took photo through Snap, later took photo, put it on Facebook, February 13, 3:49. So contacted 2 weeks later. Police rude. They didn't want to hear from them. They forced the police to take the photos. All right, wait, this is crazy. Recovered photos from timeline. Sat on the platform when they first arrived, sat and looked at the water, had 2 cigarettes, looked at the water, talked only to people on the bridge. Did you hear anything unusual? No. Did you see anyone there? Far side, few feet off the bridge, used the bathroom. No noises, no vehicles. Nothing unusual. Left the platform and turned right. Lady on a moped and a man frantic. A man frantic. Talking back and forth very fast. I wonder if that's supposed to be walking. Get back to Bob's. Oh my God. Um, Called the police. Very rude, very disrespectful. 2 weeks later, law enforcement finally wanted a timeline. Sat on the platform, smoked 2 smokes. Did you hear anything? No. When we got to that side of the bridge and went to the bathrooms, we took off a few feet. We went off a few feet. We saw nothing. We went back to the trail, saw a lady and a man communicating, frantic. No contact with us. There was a moped and then a car with the man with it. Went towards town. Arrived at 250 to 355. Feet dangling. After 4 is when we got back to the car. The 2 girls out there that had gone missing the next morning, about the girls they found. A purple Chrysler 300 was parked there. They called police, very serious matter, gave their number. 2 weeks later, law enforcement reached out. I met with the officer at the Indiana Beach parking lot. All right, I'm just making sure you guys are still with me while I'm reading this. Uh, make sure I should still keep going, that this is all right. All right, let's go. Frantic. Did you see anyone on County Road walking? No. Took Shelby home, then went back to her house in Monticello. 355, Shelby's feet dangling. They were there 10 to 15 minutes after 4 when they left. Saw no one else on the trail. Posted and tagged on Facebook. Person commented about 2 girls missing. Did you see them? No. The next morning they saw they were found. Again, it's a purple Chrysler. Shelley Hicks, Daniel Duncan were on the bridge. Met with police. A white male told boyfriend called, showed them the phone logs, the Snapchats, the timestamps, took the info 2 weeks after the fact. Officer antagonizing. Did not take any evidence from the phone. No recording from the officer. 6 months later, she heard from the FBI. Asked for her mother because her phone is registered to her phone. Her phone did ping at that location. She told she spoke to law enforcement, said thank you, no other questions. So she must have been picked up on the geofencing. Did not hear from law enforcement until a few years later. Tried to call law enforcement several times, experienced doxing, had to remove herself from objection relevance sustained. Let's see what Bob said here. A male cop showed him his phone and a Snapchat. Did law enforcement take the phone? No. Interview was not recorded. 6 months later, I heard from the FBI. They were asking for her mother, 5-minute call. So she posted on Facebook, got doxed. There was a letter letting them know she had relevant information. It was admitted over objection. Letter to prosecutor. Someone misquoted what she saw. Wow. All right, let me go back to the other one. Told law enforcement, moved, married, not hiding, just staying offline. Did you create this letter? Yes. Purpose, how to contact her in the future. Explaining that the letter proves that she's not on law enforcement's radar. The judge allows submission. Judge interrupts and says, let the jury read, because they hand the letter to the jury. After you submit the letter, does law enforcement show up again? Yes, sometime in 2023. Officer shows up. Cheryl Loeffler, no. Shelby Duncan. Asks Shelby Hicks, correct? She said, no. Shelby Duncan. No more questions. Does not hear from law enforcement again. Sorry. Contacted by the defense last spring. Are those your words? Yes, she put all this in a letter because she was asking for help because she was being bullied online. Never said she saw Richard Allen. She never said she saw Richard Allen. Were law enforcement harassing you? No. People online harassing you? Yes. Wears her camera around her neck sometimes. Wait, unsure. Something with camera around neck sometime. Unsure. Man walking, passing behind the highway before she got to the bridge. 312. Defendant exhibit at 349. She went to the bathroom. At 355, she was still on the high bridge, so she took a picture. Okay, so that's getting into cross. So I'm going back to Bob's cross. Only male I saw had something around his neck. Old man towards cars. I think that says old man. At 312, the phone call was on the trail for a short time. At 349, on the way back to the high bridge, 355 takes the last picture. Did you have all right, so let's go to jury questions, I guess. Any vehicles under the bridge? No, just water. 349 to 355 back is that how long it took you on the way to the end? She explains 349 part was on the way back before taking the picture. All right. So Bob writes, the question was, did it take 6 minutes to cross the bridge? And she said 10 minutes was my best guess. And there's another witness. So who wants me to keep going with this? Do you guys think we should keep going or just wait and Bob can circle back on this tomorrow? And Lisa, I can't tell if Bob sent me your notes or whose notes that all right, keep going. I am okay. I probably need water, but um that's like a whole thing. Second witness, Teresa. I know this last name, but I can't tell from the handwriting and I'm can't. All right. Teresa. She's the last house on the left before Brad Weber. Maybe these are your notes. Lived there 48 years. Do you know the Webers? Yes. Do they have a gate? Yes. Purpose to keep people from trespassing. Bob says, same thing. Our house is at the end of 625 West before you get to Brad Weber's place, I think. Is there a gate at the property? There's a gate at the property to keep people out from trespassing. There's a few homes, 3 on the left, 2 on the right. 8:30 in the morning, she was coming home. Somebody was standing at the mailboxes. It was a stranger. We parked and we looked back at the mailboxes. The man was gone. At some point in time, we described the man we saw to law enforcement. Question: if you had to walk to the High Bridge, how long would it take you? 10 minutes. Wait. Oh, Bob printed this page twice, so ignore that. That was like, I think some of his jury questions, because then it goes back to the second witness. Okay, no, this was her. So 10 minutes would take her. All right, then Luttrell cross-examines this witness. There's like a little picture here on the other person's notes. Her house, Weber's house. Weber has another entrance to the property. 3 houses before hers. She was coming home from town, saw someone standing next to the mailbox. This was odd to her. She pulled in the driveway. The guy was suddenly gone. She commented to her husband, "Where did he go?" If they had passed her gate, he would have ended up on the High Bridge. So if they had passed her gate, he would have ended up on the High Bridge. They let law enforcement know. And then this says 5 to 10 minute walk from her house to the High Bridge. The prosecution says later that afternoon, people were knocking on your door. No. Have you seen the photo? Let's see what Bob's got here. At 4 p.m., did someone knock on your door? No. Did that person you saw have you seen the person since, and have you seen a photo? No. Was this a neighbor or anyone you had seen before? No. Jury questions. February 13th, 2017, school was out. Could this have been a high schooler or a student because there was no school? Response, no. Let's see what Bob wrote. Same thing. No. 2 motions filed by the defense trying to get an idea of the judge's rulings. Defense stated they filed several motions, asked the judge for time, doesn't know if the state intends to respond. The state says they don't know. Wanted it in writing. Witnesses in earnest, unsure. Basically waiting in court for the jury to be bust off. Trying to get an idea of the rulings. All right, so that's all we have. That is all we have. Let me go over to your questions here. All right, so Safety Doc asks, can you talk about how the state's rebuttal case works as far as what they can present, present and what they can't? So, in a typical scenario, all they can do is counter something specifically raised, something new, it's supposed to be something new raised by the defense's case that they get the chance to rebut. But it seems that they could be allowed to do anything, in this specific situation, because I've been seeing them, you know, do do a lot of that as far as recalling witnesses, asking the same subjects again, um, stuff like that. Let's see. All right, so whatever clever. Thank you very much. Do we know the number of calls he made versus the number of calls he made with confessions? Do we know the dates of the confession calls have some meaningful pattern? So, I mean, I'm hoping that's something that the defense is going to point out for us to make it more kind of clear. Like, is there a pattern? When did he take his medications before that? How long had they ceased allowing him to call his family? Because it seems like one of those confessions is right after he's allowed to make phone calls again. Because they're like, "Oh, it's good to hear your voice," and you've got, um, both Kathy and his mother saying, "Oh, they're letting you make phone calls again," and he's responding with, "Well, for now they are." So, salty sweet Caroline, thank you. Do you think Brad Rosie will give you and Allie an interview when it's all over? I mean, I hope so, but Bob would obviously be in a better position to speak to that, but I don't know. Habitual line stepper, thank you. How can the defense effectively plant the seed that Walla fed RA the information while he was overdosed on undocumented mind altering drugs? I think it's something that they can argue. I think they did plant the seed because they planted the seed that Walla was aware of information. Walla was sharing information she learned with Richard Allen. So that's something that they can now argue in closing. Exactly what you're what you're saying. Critical mediator raising hell. Thank you very much. So Ari got spooked by a van, unalives two girls, redressed one, moves on, moves one, puts sticks on both before he takes off. That's not spooked, not guilty. I mean, that's my position. Be perfectly honest. Thanks, Helena. Thanks, Purple Pen Notes. Um, thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Sunny Bunny. Trying to get to you guys' questions too. Um, all right, K Dog. In my opinion, if he just found the Bible, Jesus gave his life body for his loved one. So Richard Allen was ready to also, if takes away his wife's pain. I mean, that's what it seemed like. And, thank you very much. JD, thank you. But that video has been so immensely altered. There's no way to do a proper comparison. I 100% agree. And I don't know what kind of objections they're making in the courtroom. If they're going to sidebar and they're making these objections or what. But, maybe they're just like not worried about it because they're going to argue on at closing that, like you heard these officers, you heard them say how much altering had to be done to that audio to make out the words, and you're going to believe that they know better, they can hear better than you can hear whose voice it is, that kind of thing. Um Thank you, Tracy. I'm sure that was from earlier. I did that. And Bob actually did send me a picture. Thanks, Dizzy. Oh, my phone died, but I've got my texts on my. All right, I think I said thanks to Ann P earlier. Unless that actually this looks like another one. So thank you for Delphi lunch donation. Laura F paid you $100. Wow, very generous. You're all very generous. So I'm sorry to make a bigger deal out of the 100. Allie, you are rocking the lunch lives. Love the way you break down the law. Bob, you're pretty awesome too. Thank you very much. Thomas M. Um, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I appreciate what you and your wife are doing. Megan P gave a Halloween fund. Thank you, Megan. Halloween candy fund. Happy Halloween and thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you. Um, and then thank you, Afton, gifting that membership. All right, where the cosmic dust. Thank you very much. Was Alan not allowed to sign a confession in jail since he had lawyers? Why is there no signed confession? They could not get him to sign a confession. They can't talk to him without his lawyers. So, and look, I'm going to go out on a limb and say if on April 5th he sends this note to the warden about wanting to confess, and all of a sudden it goes from 1 month, she's seeing him, she being Walla, is seeing Alan 1 month to him saying, she comes and speaks to me every day because she's the only one that can speak to him and it not be kicked out because they talk to him without, a lawyer present. Even though he writes, I want to confess, the warden can't be like, okay, come up and confess because he has a lawyer, he has his right to counsel, so it can't be done. Um, all right, let's see if I got all this stuff up here. Um, we touched on that. All right, criminal network. FBI trained in Quantico. Homicide detectives stated Ron Logan and Bridge Guy, and the voice heard with voice analysis was also Ron Logan. I mean, that's my understanding is that the FBI did a comparison. I don't remember the voice, me personally, maybe someone else in the chat knows, but they did a comparison and I think it was something like, we can't say for 100% sure, but here's all the reasons why this picture is Ron Logan. Marissa, how are they bringing these in? Do they not have anyone on the stand? I've never heard of calls without a witness. They use the witness of the person who listened to all of the calls. Was he on camera 24/7? Have they shown abuse in court? Will they for the defense case? Are they allowed? I think, yes, they are. They should be. You never know with this judge. And I'm surely anticipating that we're going to get something, because they keep saying, you guys are going to see it to the jury. You're going to see it with your own eyes. So I'm assuming we're going to get some video. Profanity-based fun. I'm a little behind. Does anyone else feel like his call to his dad was code for, I'm just going to confess to stop their torturing me. I need to be recorded so I can prove it later. Great point. Really, really good point. I don't know if he was with it enough at that point. Like maybe we won't know until we hear that, if we ever hear it. But really good point. I mean, that could have been it. It's only 2 hours later. But then he also said he forgot that he called his dad. So who knows? Jenny Meow Meow. Do you think the recordings / electronics bans could be in place so that the defense can't re-listen to testimony after the trial day ends, or is that foolish thinking? Nothing is foolish thinking, but the defense has all of this, so they can listen to it as much as they want. I think it's so that the public can't hear it, you know, and no one else can listen to it as much as they want. The rest of us. Frankie Christian says the van wasn't in discovery, except it was. Say he's seen it on Reddit and worked it into a false confession. Bob, please say that again. So I don't know, because well, that wasn't that long ago. So it was that the defense asked the witness, do you know that the van there were hundreds of vans in discovery? And I don't know who saw what on Reddit and worked it into a false confession. I think what we're saying is, if the community was aware that, that that Weber interrupted, or the theory that they all believed Weber interrupted the perpetrator, and that was something that was known and out there in the public, then either Richard Allen could have known it and not worked it into his false confession, but like it sounds like he was starting to question and believe that he did it, is one possibility. But in any event, that the guards could have known it, the other, Walla could have known it, whoever it was could have known it. So that's that. Can you talk about the states that did that? Okay, when Alan was not allowed. Okay, so that's everything. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Sorry, I know it get at the end there when Bob's not here and me just reading his notes, gets difficult, but we will see you tomorrow. Thanks everybody, and happy Halloween.
After